My name is Rain. I woke up with a painful bump on my head after being kicked by a donkey. Now I'm standing in the courtyard of Habsburg Manor, trying to understand where I am and what is happening. The courtyard was wide and dusty. In the distance stood a tall stone castle that belonged to the Habsburg family. Around the yard, several teenage boys wearing rough tunics stood in a half circle. In the middle of them was a big, muscular man carefully trimming the hoof of a donkey. I blinked in confusion. Wait, is that hoof trimming? I was completely stunned. Just then, a wave of memories rushed into my mind like pictures flashing one after another. My name in this world was Rain. About an hour ago, I had been kicked in the head by a donkey. That was why the huge lump on my forehead was still throbbing. The man trimming the donkey's hoof is the blacksmith of Habsburg Manor. While I was still dizzy, the blacksmith suddenly shouted loudly, "You little brats, didn't you eat breakfast? You can't even hold down a donkey's hoof. Hurry up and hold it still." Two young servants were struggling to hold the donkey's leg. Sweat ran down their faces as they tried their best, but the donkey was strong and they were too weak. Watching them, I shook my head slightly. Just like me, those two boys were skinny and weak. It was obvious they didn't have the strength to hold the animal properly. More memories from this body slowly appeared in my mind. The previous owner of this body had joined the servant training at Habsburg Manor only 2 days ago. His family had used almost all their savings and even bribed the manor's servant chief just to get him a place here. In this world, it was common for nobles who owned land to recruit children and teenagers into servant training. From a young age, they would be trained and tested. Only a few would eventually become official servants of the manor. Male servant positions included many jobs: coachman, guard, cook, baker, butcher, winemaker, blacksmith, dog trainer, falconer, and more. After 3 months of training, the manor would hold an assessment. Only 5 young servants would be chosen. 2 would become blacksmith apprentices, 2 would become guards, and 1 would become a dog trainer. Because of that, all the training for this group focused on those 3 jobs. When I realized this, a strange thought suddenly appeared in my mind. This is like an otherworldly version of civil service exams. Then another thought followed. I got transported to another world. My goal is to work hard just to become someone else's servant. What kind of nonsense is that? Just then, the loud chatter around me made my head hurt even more. The pain from the donkey's kick still hadn't faded. While enduring the pain, I glanced sideways. Not far from me stood several tall boys wearing clean linen tunics. They looked much better dressed than the rest of us. They were pointing at me while laughing loudly. Kicked by a donkey. That's too funny. As I looked at them, more memories appeared in my mind. These boys were the elite among the young servants. They were all sons of shop owners in the town. Basically, they were the rich kids of Flashgold Town. They always stayed together and often bullied the other young servants. Since I had just arrived, I had quickly become one of their targets. They forced me to clean the dormitory every day, even though the rules said the work should rotate among everyone. I looked at them one by one. The one with the thick eyebrows, he's the tavern owner's son. People call him Thick Brows. The freckled one, his family owns the town's inn. His nickname is Freckles. And the one wearing brown linen shorts, he's the tanner's son. He's not too bad, no nickname. I lowered my head and looked at my thin arms and weak body. Damn, how useless. Getting bullied by a bunch of kids. I could only shake my head helplessly. After laughing at me for a while, the rich kids started chatting about other things. I pretended not to care, but I secretly listened carefully. I needed to learn about this world. Did you hear? The freckled boy whispered. Albero Town, not far from Flashgold Town, was attacked by a wandering ogre last night. Many people were killed or injured. His family owned an inn, so he often heard news from travelers. He was one of the best informed kids here. Really? Thick Brows asked, his face turning pale. Why has there been so much bad news lately? Just a few days ago, Merchant Caravan said there was some kind of cult sacrifice in Monheim Town. A lot of people died there too. Thick Brows' family ran a tavern, so he also heard plenty of gossip. The tanner's son sighed. Ah, if only we could go live in County Town, life there is much safer. Freckles shook his head. It's not that easy. First you need to pass the manor selection and become an official guard. Then maybe your superiors will notice you and transfer you to the main household in County Town. But that's extremely difficult. Thick Brows clenched his strong arm confidently. Still, becoming an official guard here is the first step. Listening to them, I fell into deep thought. Could this world be a transcendent world? My heart suddenly filled with excitement, worry, and curiosity, but I still didn't know what kind of extraordinary world this was. The memories in my mind didn't help much. The previous Rain had never left this small town. He had never seen monsters or any mysterious creatures. Traveling bards and mercenaries sometimes passed through the town. They told amazing stories about monsters hiding in the night, giant sea beasts in the ocean, haunted houses in busy markets, and deadly plagues. The old Rain had always thought those stories were just fairy tales. But listening to the rich kids talk, maybe those stories were actually true. I rubbed my chin and thought quietly. Just then a loud voice suddenly shouted, "Next group, Rain, George." The blacksmith ball was calling our names. I quickly stood up. A boy with short, light yellow hair walked beside me. His name was George. Together we stepped forward and grabbed the donkey's leg, trying our best to hold its hoof down. At that moment, Blacksmith Ball stepped closer. With one hand, he easily lifted a large iron tool and began trimming the donkey's overgrown and bent hoof. As he worked, I noticed something. The center of the donkey's hoof looked a little inflamed. During the trimming, a small amount of pus slowly leaked out. The strong black donkey suddenly felt pain. Hee-haw! It brayed loudly and began shaking its body violently. George and I immediately tightened our grip and used all our strength to hold the hoof still so Ball could continue his work. In less than 2 minutes, sweat was already dripping down my forehead. My black hair stuck to my skin and my arms felt like they were about to give out. I was almost out of strength. Luckily, this is the last hoof, I thought. Once this donkey is done, the next group will take over. Then I can finally rest. A working Ball explained as he demonstrated. Watch carefully. When trimming hooves, you must be bold but also careful. Keep your wrist loose. Soon, the last hoof was finished. The moment we let go, George and I collapsed onto the ground like deflated balloons. Our exhausted appearance immediately made the rich kids burst into laughter again. George's face turned red with anger, but I didn't react. Instead, I froze for a moment, because right then, something strange happened. A transparent box suddenly appeared in front of my eyes. It floated right on my vision, as if it was projected onto my retina. The box automatically flipped to a second page. Several lines of small text appeared along with a row of icons. You have assisted in hoof trimming work. Comprehension increased. You have learned a new skill, hoof trimming. Your skill, hoof trimming, gained experience +1. Congratulations. You have unlocked the job panel, Blacksmith Apprentice. The title on the first line of the page reads in 4 large characters. Apprentice Blacksmith LV1 0/100, with a dense array of icons below it. Except for the one icon at the bottom that was lit up, all the other icons were dim and obscure. Despite Rain trying hard to inspect them by squinting, he found he could not make them out clearly. The lit-up icon was the nailing horseshoe skill that had just been prompted. The icon was shaped like a rounded square, creatively depicted with a central image of the bottom of a hoof facing upwards, and beside it was a black iron shovel, vivid and lifelike. Beneath the icon, there were a few small words. Nailing horseshoes LV1, 1/100. However, Rain was still a bit puzzled. Logically speaking, if his fixing of the donkey's hooves could trigger the vocational panel, shouldn't it have triggered the veterinarian vocational panel? Why did it trigger the apprentice blacksmith vocational panel instead? Could it be because the skill of fixing donkey hooves was taught by a blacksmith? Or was it because in this world, tasks like fixing donkey hooves and nailing horseshoes were done by apprentice blacksmiths? Rain shook his head slightly, baffled. Regardless, triggering the apprentice blacksmith vocational panel was always a good thing. What was the status of a blacksmith in the age of cold weapons? Those who know, know. Rain touched his chin, and a smile suddenly appeared on his lips. Hey Rain, what are you grinning about? George tugged on him. George had blonde short hair and a lanky figure, Rain's only close friend. Come on, do you want to do another round? It's someone else's turn now, George said, tilting his chin. Rain pondered for a moment. Master Ball, may I go for another round? Rain said, turning to Master Ball under the astonished gaze of the serving boys. His best pal George was constantly tugging subtly at his ragged clothes behind him, anxiously whispering lowly, Rain, did a donkey kick your head? The next second, his voice abruptly stopped. Stop pulling, or I'll have nothing to wear at all. Rain lifted the worn cloth coat, now nearly a strip of cloth. Rain's volunteering surprised Ball. He looked at Rain's serious face, then nodded and said, Okay then, Engels, you're up next round. Engels was the son of the town's tanner, dressed in brown linen shorts. Upon hearing he could rest, he walked aside, chatting cheerfully again. Angels even patted Rain's shoulder on his way out, saying, "Smart move." This wasn't against the rules, after all. Doing another round was Rain's own suggestion. And besides, Angels aimed to be a guard at Habs Manor, not an apprentice blacksmith. The task of fixing donkey hooves was something he absolutely didn't want to touch. After working all morning, Rain stopped to rest only when he could hardly move anymore. This body was truly a bit too weak. Otherwise, Rain figured he could have lasted even longer. Looking up at the panel, although his hands were trembling from fatigue, seeing the screen full of experience +1 still felt as sweet to Rain as if he had eaten honey. You assisted in fixing donkey hooves. Insight improved. Your skill nailing horseshoes has improved. Experience +1. You focused on learning nailing horseshoes for 1 hour. Apprentice blacksmith professional experience points +1. Your skill nailing horseshoes has improved. Experience +1. Your skill nailing horseshoes has improved. Experience +1. Circle the key points. Experience +1 and apprentice blacksmith professional experience points +1. These two are different. The rate of increase in skill experience is far greater than that in apprentice blacksmith professional experience points. Looking at the skill nailing horseshoes LV, 12/100, Rain couldn't help but fall into thought. In just one morning, he had gained 12 experience points. Truly, the rate of increase wasn't slow. After all, he was only helping to hold down the donkey's hooves, not fixing them himself. There were only a few dozen donkeys within Habs Manor. So, at most, he could fix donkey hooves for one more day tomorrow, and then the task of fixing donkey hooves would be done. After that, if he wanted to further improve his nail horseshoe skill, he would have to wait till next month or even the month after. Looking at it that way, it seemed he wouldn't be able to level up the skill nailing horseshoes anytime soon. Rain glanced at the apprentice blacksmith, particularly the experience bar at the bottom right of the words LV1, 2/100. The professional experience had only increased by 2 points. Could it be because fixing donkey hooves was too unrelated to the apprentice blacksmith profession? Rain sighed internally, a bit troubled. How many years and months will it be before I can level up the apprentice blacksmith? The assessment is in 3 months. If I can't advance by then, there's no chance at the assessment. Thinking about it, Rain flipped the panel back to the first page. Is this first page the attribute panel? Occupation, apprentice blacksmith LV1 note, ordinary adult males have an attribute of 6 for all fields, only 4 points in strength. Absolutely feeble attributes. No wonder I struggled to hold down even a donkey's hoof. Rain sighed helplessly internally. With spirit being the highest at 8 points, higher than an ordinary adult's, perhaps it was because of the merger between him and his original body. Rain, let's go, stop dawdling. Off to lunch, his best friend George called out. What's going on with you today? Why are you always so distracted? George asked with concern. Rain smiled slightly and said casually, maybe it's because I got hurt and I'm just overthinking. Let's go, lunch. George was momentarily startled and then realized. It was true, as he often found himself daydreaming. Moreover, his buddy Rain had his. By a donkey. The treatment of child servants at the Habsburg Manor wasn't too bad. At least they could scrounge a relatively sumptuous meal. A piece of black bread, half a smoked fish, and a big bowl of vegetable broth that was Rain and the other child servants' lunch. Looking at the food, which did little to whet Rain's appetite, his friends beside him were swallowing, salivating, their Adam's apples bobbing ceaselessly. As a formal attendant shouted, "Eat up!" everyone began to wolf down their food. Rain felt the loaf of black bread the size of a brick, its coarse texture and hard crust. Boy, oh boy. This couldn't really be a brick painted black, could it? He glanced sideward, where his friends were already tearing the black bread roughly apart, crushing it into the bland vegetable soup, which soon thickened. Rain nodded slightly, understanding this method, which was similar to eating naan. After doing the same, Rain also began to swallow eagerly. Tui, there are even wood shavings in the black bread. This stuff really isn't fit for humans to eat. Rain was speechless for a moment, thinking back to his past life when he had no idea what kind of meat was in his delivery food. That was sad enough. But this world was even worse, with no meat to be had at all. Rain struggled to swallow while his thoughts drifted. This child servant training kind of reminds me of the military training in my previous life, just that it lasts much longer, a full 3 months, and then there's the assessment that I've been so anxious about. Although I have the panel, based on the current rate of progress, it's still a bit slow. To pass the assessment and become a blacksmith apprentice smoothly, I'll need to find ways to speed things up. As for becoming a guard, of course I want to. Holding a shield and sword, clad in armor, just thinking about it gets my blood boiling. But, combining both my lives, I've never learned any swordsmanship or the like, so I'll need to find an opportunity. But I must change this current situation. Rain glanced at his buddy George, who was staring into space ahead, seemingly lost in thought about something. Following his gaze, Rain saw a girl in a gray linen maid's outfit bending over to clear the table, her slightly upturned posterior sketching an alluring curve. Oh, that's what captured the young boy's heart. Immediately, related memories of the former body surfaced. The girl's name was Sophia, around their age, also a child servant of the manor. The difference is that the girl's servant training is quite distinct from the boys', usually starting with washing, cleaning, and laundry. Girls typically develop and mature earlier than boys. By now, Sophia could be considered a bud ready to bloom. Looking around, Rain noticed that Sophia attracted not just George's gaze, but that of several other young lads as well. However, for the long-tempered Rain, the allure of a maiden's maid outfit was nothing much. But for teenage boys at the dawn of their hormones, it was a distraction that could make them forget to eat or sleep. "George, what are you looking at?" George startled, his face turned red as he held up half of the black bread. "No. Nothing, Rain. Oh, you worked hard all morning. If you're not full here, you can have my half too. Are you sure you've got enough?" Rain looked up at George, asking in surprise. "I'm almost full, you eat it," George said reluctantly. In fact, he could have squeezed that bit of black bread into his stomach. He wanted to use it to shut Rain up. Besides, he felt that after Rain had been injured yesterday and had worked so hard today, he truly needed to replenish his strength. Rain nodded, silently giving his best buddy George a good guy card in his mind, but as for the black bread mixed with sawdust, he could only decline politely. After a while, Rain thought about it and felt that it was necessary to remind his buddy, so he said in a low voice without lifting his head, "George, even if you look at her 100 times, she won't be yours. Instead of wasting time, think about how to pass the assessment. As long as you pass the assessment, she will be yours." Suddenly, George's face turned bright red, and he looked around in panic before anxiously saying, "Rain, even though we are best friends, you can't just say anything. I didn't peek at Sophia." "He. I didn't mention anyone. You're the one who said Sophia." Instantly, George was dumbfounded, realizing his buddy had become much more perceptive after his brain got kicked by a donkey, as if he had become smarter than before. Getting kicked in the head by a donkey also has its advantages. In the afternoon, a group of child servants continued to learn how to trim donkey hooves. After eating lunch, Rain's strength had mostly recovered. Even though he still had back pain, he was motivated by the constant +1+1 increase in experience. Rain was full of energy. However, the child servants hadn't trimmed many donkey hooves in the afternoon when they saw more than 20 young men and women, mostly men, arrive at the central yard outside the castle. The newcomers appeared to be about the same age as Rain and the others, but the boys were tall, and the girls were youthful, beautiful, exceptionally well dressed, looking very much like the castle's owners. As the group came closer, memories from his original self informed Rain that these were the offspring of some lower nobility and wealthy merchants under Count Habs, training as night attendants at the Habsburg estate. Since the Habsburg estate was only a half-day's journey from county town, a mere hour by horse, it made sense to hold night attendant training there, as it was the birthplace of the Habs family, continuing a tradition. Rain glanced back at the rich kids beside him. It turned out they were all faux rich second generations. The newcomers were the real deal authentic second generations. The outer courtyard was a large enclosed space, typically used as a training ground for night attendants and guards, but sometimes a small section was designated for other purposes. Meaning, these child servants were essentially interlopers occupying the training grounds meant for the true second generation. The child servant who was staring at the real second generations got slapped on the head by Baal, only to hear Baal say disdainfully, "You little rascals, don't be envious. They are born into a level you couldn't reach in your lifetime no matter how hard you try. You lot, if you learn a good craft well, you'll be able to live comfortably in the future." Crude but not devoid of reason, Rain agreed with Ball. In such times, upward social mobility was nearly impossible. If the child servants could learn one or two crafts well, that would be enough to secure their livelihood. Rain's pupils shrank. It seemed he had seen something unbelievable. He saw a stalwart man at least 1.9 meters tall, clad in gray metal armor, yet still striding as if on wings. Wielding a dual-handed greatsword wider than a palm, deliver a ferocious downward slash that struck a standing, bar-shaped stone block heavily. A silvery arc flashed by. The top half of the stone bar fell off at an angle, landing heavily on the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. The freshly cut surface of the stone was smooth and free of burrs. Immediately, the true second-generation heirs began clapping their hands. Amazing, Instructor Perez is really something. Wow, is this the strength of a real knight? I don't know when I'll be able to reach this level. Rain watched the scene unfold before him, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. A thick stone bar, hardly liftable by one person. Split with a single sword strike. Is this something a human could possibly do? If the memories of transcendence and the unknown he had before were merely based on hearsay from wandering bards and mercenaries, now, this scene was unfolding right before Rain's eyes. For a modern person, this impactful and vivid scene was akin to witnessing Iron Man landing on one's own balcony, leaving Rain utterly dumbfounded. After a prolonged moment of shock, Rain glanced at his transparent panel and realized it suddenly lost its appeal. Even if he truly became a blacksmith, that would still make him just an ordinary person. This world is indeed a transcendent world. Those wealthy heirs weren't bragging. All the hearsay in the original host's memory was true. Now that I'm in a transcendent world, if there's ever a chance to become transcendent, I must try my hardest. Otherwise, what difference would there be from a salted fish? In the midst of his shock, Rain made up his mind. At that moment, something changed in the center of the training ground. It seemed that among those true second generations, a noble girl dressed in hunting gear voluntarily stepped forward, wishing to spar with the burly swordsmanship Instructor Perez, who was dressed in full armor. From Rain's perspective, he couldn't see the girl's face, but from the side alone, he could sense that the noble girl must be beautiful, with a tight figure, like a leopardess ready to pounce. Indeed, the swordsmanship Instructor Perez accepted. And the two soon crossed swords. Sparks flew everywhere. The shapely noble girl began the duel with a leap slash, holding a two-handed sword, clashing head-on against Perez's greatsword. This strike hit Rain squarely in the heart. If the feat of splitting the stone earlier could possibly be attributed to personal talent, the clash they just witnessed, with very real sparks flying, confirmed the immense strength of both participants. The fact that a noble girl possessed such great strength was indisputable proof that this world was a transcendent one. Rain could think of no other reasonable explanation. Cling clang cling clang. Although the noble girl wielded a heavy metal greatsword, her movements were incredibly fast, her figure agile like a gazelle, swiftly changing positions with a mere toes touch, continuously attacking Perez from various tricky angles. Her chestnut ponytail bounced behind her with each leap. Much like a rock in the sea, the swordsmanship Instructor Perez remained steadfast, not initiating any counterattacks, but instead standing firm, continually parrying the noble girl's assaults. Smooth cleaving slash. After the aristocratic young girl let out a sharp rebuke, she leapt several meters high. Mid-air, her lively figure tensed up like a bowstring pulled to its limits, brimming with explosive power. In an instant, the girl swiftly swung the broad two-handed sword at least 1.5 meters in length, drawing a semi-circular arc with a downward angle of 45 degrees, and fiercely cleaved down towards the swordsmanship Instructor Perez. A teeth-gritting metallic friction noise rose. Even though the child servants like Rain were at least 20 to 30 meters away from them, their ears ached from the impact of the collision. Their gums felt numb. The true second generations up front also couldn't withstand it, frowning and covering their ears. Only 4 or 5 people managed to watch the sparring match without changing their expressions. Suddenly, a small spark of gray light splashed from the clash of the swords to the ground about a meter in front of Rain. Since the landing spot was close to Rain, he could clearly see that the spark seemed to be a small metal fragment, likely from a notch in the dual-handed greatsword held by swordsmanship Instructor Perez or the aristocratic young girl. At that moment, swordsmanship Instructor Perez and the aristocratic young girl almost simultaneously looked towards Rain's direction. In an instant, Rain's heart jolted with fear, feeling as if he were being watched by a fierce beast, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. This oppressive feeling. However, after both sides took a casual glance, they turned their heads away and no longer paid attention to the fragment, appearing to only be checking whether the shards had hurt someone or not. And that aristocratic young girl's glance back finally allowed Rain to get a clear view of the girl's appearance. 4 words described her: majestic and valiant, with an oval face and somewhat thick eyebrows that gave her a spirited air. A pair of brown-gray eyes sparkled brilliantly, and her tight-fitting hunting outfit only added to her agile form. She resembled a foreign actress Rain knew from his previous life, Christiana Yuri, in her younger days. Swordsmanship instructor Perez then glanced at his dual-handed greatsword, eyeing the irregularly shaped notch with a slight twinge of sorrow in his heart. This sword had been with him for many years, and he didn't expect. Instructor Perez, I'm terribly sorry, I got too carried away just now and didn't hold back. The greatsword might need some repairs. I'll speak to Master Varenton about it. The aristocratic young girl, tactful and quick-witted, immediately spoke up after seeing the slight frown on Perez's face. After the interlude of their sparring session, the true second generations under the guidance of swordsmanship instructor Perez began learning some advanced swordsmanship. Rain, standing to the side, bowed his head, staring blankly at the small iron shard embedded in the ground. After a long while, he realized that they seemed to have no intention of picking up the small iron shard. He dug it out. The first feeling was its heaviness. The small fragment was surprisingly weighty in his hand, quite substantial, obviously not made of bronze, but also not seeming to be ordinary steel. With it, Rain could roughly estimate how heavy the dual-handed greatsword of over 1.5 meters truly was. Swinging a weapon weighing 70 or 80 pounds, this was several times heavier than weapons in the era of cold weaponry in his previous life. Rain realized instantly. It made some sense that the burly swordsmanship instructor, Perez, could wield it, but how could that delicately built, aristocratic young girl manage? What was the situation? Was it through some secret technique or training she acquired later on? Or was it from her bloodline, a sort of innate talent? If it's the former case, then I should also stand a chance, Rain thought to himself. Haven't learned any swordsmanship, too old to embark on a transcendent path. That seems quite logical. But that's for ordinary people. If the system could trigger a blacksmith apprentice's life profession panel, then it should also be able to trigger a combat professions panel, right? I heard that the training content for child servants includes learning basic swordsmanship. I wonder if it will trigger the swordsman's panel or the warrior's panel when the time comes. Rain's eyes slowly started to shine. Apart from that, the fragment appeared as if it had been through 1,000 hammers and 100 refinings. Since it was a piece of the sword blade, Rain could clearly see the partial fish scale, like hammering marks on it. Though it was hand-forged, the layered fish scale pattern proved that the craftsman who made the greatsword was extremely skilled. Rain never underestimated hand-forging. In his previous life, a level 8 vice worker making the casing for an atomic bomb was a bona fide fact. It seemed that even the world of forging here was much stronger than he had imagined. Change places. Baal's shout instantly pulled Rain back from his wandering thoughts. Wrapping the small shard in a piece of rag, Rain slipped it into the pocket of his upper garment. He patted his butt, dusted off the dirt, and stood up to continue nailing horseshoes. You have assisted in donkey hoof repair work. Your comprehension has improved. Your skill hoof repair has improved. Experience +1. You focused on learning to repair donkey hooves for 1 hour. Blacksmith apprentice professional experience points +1. Your skill hoof repair has improved. Experience +1 in the evening. After a hard day's work, Rain returned to the servant children's dormitory, which was a large bunk room for easier management. The bunk room slept more than a dozen people, and Rain and his best friend George were not in the same dormitory. Naturally, the best spots in the middle were occupied by the faux second generation, and Rain and the other boys slept on the edges of the bunk room. Rain, move it, sweep the floor, and wipe the bed planks and the cabinets. Thick Brows commanded arrogantly, as it was his turn to clean today. Rain glanced at Thick Brows and cursed in his heart. Damn, I'm already exhausted from the day and now I have to clean up after you. What are you looking at? Hurry up, or do you want a beating? Thick Brows stood tall, his eyebrows forming an angry V shape as he menacingly stepped forward and grabbed Rain by the collar. Rain was about to fight back when he remembered his thin arms and legs and his stature being half a head shorter than thick brows. Starting a fight now would definitely not end well. He thought to himself, damn it, interdimensional school bullying, huh, just wait. I'll endure it for a couple of days, then see how I deal with you. But what he said was, aren't I just looking for a rag? I'm on it. Hearing this, thick brows suspiciously looked in the direction Rain was pointing. Indeed, there was a rag there, so he then grudgingly pushed Rain away and walked off. Rain picked up the rag and wiped all the bedsteads clean, then swept the floor, fetched water, mopped the floor, and after a series of chores, he was dead tired. As he worked, he pondered what triggered the activation of the professional panel. Previously, he had triggered Blacksmith Apprentice, so did that mean it was because he was learning how to repair donkey hooves? But now he had been sweeping, mopping, and wiping tables for over an hour, and yet he hadn't triggered the profession of servant. Was it because there was no servant profession, or was it that he hadn't swept long enough? After a tiring day, the servant boys had little desire to chat, and after a few brief conversations, they all drifted off to sleep. Rain, still fuming inside, tossed and turned, unable to sleep, his mind a mess. He thought about how he could seek rapid change, because he did not want to continue living like this. He needed to teach thick brows a lesson. Various ideas flashed through Rain's mind, such as offering a gunpowder formula that used his academic advantage to count Habs. After thinking about it, no good. Based on the memories of his original self, let alone the Earl, even the Habsburg steward was a big shot with a knight's title. Rain, a mere servant boy, couldn't possibly get in touch with them. Through the head manservant? Leaving aside whether the head manservant was reliable or not, even if the head manservant would help report up the chain, how would Rain, a poor commoner's son, explain the source of his knowledge? Moreover, if any step in the process went wrong, he might even be risking his life, given that wealth stirs human hearts. Since it was a transcendent world, the rule of might was natural, quickly figuring out a way to level up to take the first step that was the real path to power. But, speaking of might, that noble girl was really cool, awesome, and beautiful. Listening to how others addressed her, it seemed to be Lady Clea. Was she the daughter of the Earl, or some other noble family's daughter? In Rain's mind, he couldn't help but envision the confident and heroic figure of the noble girl. Her hunting outfit clinging to her skin, outlining the girl's delicate figure, especially her taut buttocks. In a daze, Rain unknowingly drifted off to sleep. At the break of dawn, the servant children were called to start their chores. Today was still about learning to repair donkey hooves, but after today's session, teaching how to nail horseshoes would pause until next month. This made Rain a bit anxious. Damn it, just when I finally got a golden finger. The donkey hooves are no more. What if I just ask Master Ball to let me have a go at fixing it myself next time? Rain glanced at his slender arms and immediately shook his head. Lacking experience and strength, even if Ball agreed, he was unlikely to fix the donkey's hooves properly. Messing it up would be counterproductive. Today, the scions of nobility hadn't come to the outer fort for training, which Rain somewhat regretted. After another day spent fixing donkey hooves, Rain looked at his skill hoofing, 32 over 100, and fell into deep contemplation. What should he do tomorrow? Early the next morning, Ball was still there, standing in front of the apprentices lined up in 2 rows, and loudly declared, "Today we learn to nail horseshoes, but before we nail horseshoes, we need to file down the hooves." Rain couldn't listen anymore to the rest of the speech. This should also count as hooves, right? Feeling a rush of excitement, Rain quickly flipped to the second page of the transparent frame, checking his skills again. It just said hoofing, not specifying whether donkey or horse hooves. Moreover, judging by the vivid hoof icon, it should apply to all parasitic tiles. Donkeys and horses are from the same family. But whether it would work still needed to be confirmed. After a short while, Rain and the other apprentices were led to the northeastern corner of the outer fort near the stables. Looking at the tall horses in the stables, all the apprentices, except Rain, couldn't help but show a bitter expression, making the pseudo-nobles who were half a head taller start to complain. Clearly, if it was so difficult to hold down a donkey's hoof already, these larger and taller steeds would be even harder to secure. Of course, except for Rain. At this moment, Rain was full of longing, excitement, and anticipation for filing horse hooves. He couldn't wait to start nailing horseshoes to confirm his guess. Before long, The first horse was led out of the stables by Master Ball. Judging by its size, it should be one of the smaller horses in the stables, but still larger than even the strongest black donkey. This is a nag. We'll start with nags. Come on, the first group. Rain, George, come and hold the hooves. Ball bellowed with a commanding voice. Rain and George immediately filed out and began holding the hooves as instructed by the master. The master took pre-made horseshoes shaped like an inverted U, checked the fit against the secured hoof, and after estimating the nailing area, started snip-snip trimming the hooves. Feeling that the trimming was about right, he began to nail the horseshoe onto the hoof. The key to nailing horseshoes is first to roughly position the horseshoe on the hoof. At this point, Ball began to demonstrate and explain to the apprentices while positioning the shoe. Rain could see clearly that the horseshoe had 7 holes, and Ball nailed it 7 times. Every time Ball nailed, the struggles of the nag intensified slightly, and Rain and George had to exert more effort to secure it. After the nailing was complete, Ball trimmed the rough edges again, finishing the horseshoeing for one hoof. Once they finished holding down all 4 hooves of the nag, and a sweaty Rain caught his breath, he suddenly froze. A system alert had just come through. You assisted with horseshoeing, gaining insight. Your hoofing skill has improved. Experience +4. You concentrated on learning to nail horseshoes for a quarter of an hour. Gaining +1 blacksmith apprentice professional experience points. Looking at the hoofing skill experience bar climb again. A surge of excitement welled up inside Rain. Although he had anticipated gaining experience for horseshoeing too, seeing it actually happen still gave him a thrill. What was more critical was that the rate of experience gain was much faster than when fixing donkey hooves. Rain found that he seemed to have discovered the secret to rapid improvement. Previously, when he focused on fixing donkey hooves for an hour, he would only gain +1 blacksmith apprentice professional experience points. But this time, in just 15 minutes, his blacksmith apprentice professional experience points increased by 1. And now, the experience bar for blacksmith apprentice read 8/100. Rain guessed that this was probably because nailing horseshoes was more relevant to the blacksmith apprentice profession than fixing donkey hooves, which is why he gained more professional experience points. Though it was just Rain's speculation, he believed it was mostly correct. It made Rain feel as if he had stumbled upon a new, bright path. As noon approached suddenly, the system displayed a different notification. You assisted in nailing horseshoes, insight improved. You have comprehended a new skill nailing horseshoes. Your skill nailing horseshoes has increased. Experience +1 curious. Rain immediately flipped to the second page, the one for the blacksmith apprentice's profession panel. The dense array of skills, aside from one lit-up icon of a hoof trimming, another icon now lit up in the position opposite to it. Nailing horseshoes LV1, 1/100. This icon was simple, depicting a horseshoe in an inverted U shape, with 7 tiny holes clearly visible on it, while other icons on the profession panel remained obscure and unclear. Could it be that after some time of diligent learning, a profession-related skill can be triggered to light up, and then one could continuously practice to enhance the skill level? It seems that's the case. This discovery engaged Rain completely in the study of nailing horseshoes, to the extent that even the reappearance of the noble girl in the middle of the outer castle didn't make him look up more than once. At lunchtime, his close friend George looked at him quite strangely and said, "Rain, I've noticed you've changed." These words slightly startled Rain. Could it be that, as an old friend, George had noticed something was off about him? "Rain, why are you working as if you're on a stimulant? Trimming donkey hooves and nailing horseshoes. You keep going till you absolutely can't anymore before you stop." Rain sighed in relief. So it was just this, he thought to himself. That's because you don't have a golden finger. Otherwise, George, you might be even more diligent than me. Haha, maybe I just had a sudden realization. I've come to understand the importance of learning a trade, Rain said with a smile. Really? George looked at Rain suspiciously. He always felt something had changed about his best friend, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. However, since Rain mentioned understanding the importance of learning a trade, George agreed with him. Although George's family wasn't very well off either, both of his parents were freemen with land and a stable source of income, so his circumstances were much better than Rain's. Unlike Rain's home, where his father was a farmer who worked someone else's land, and his mother had no stable source of income, not to mention, they also had a younger sister. So, was understandable that Rain was more eager to master a trade than he was. After the young servants finished their lunch and rested briefly, they continued learning to nail horseshoes under Baal's guidance. Initially, nailing horseshoes captured the attention of the young boys, but as they became a bit familiar with it, the pseudo-second generation began to grow impatient since their aim was to be guards. Whether they learned nailing horseshoes or not didn't matter. Soon, these pseudo-second generation kids started chatting about various topics. These moments were when Rain got to catch up on outside news, so he immediately perked up his ears and listened. "Hey, have you heard? Recently it's been quite troubled. I heard that a vicious group of pirates landed ashore." Bushy Brows announced a big piece of news right off the bat. "Pirates. Although Flashgold Town is not far from the sea, there is still some distance, right? How does pirates landing relate to us?" Freckles responded with a question. "Not sure. I heard from Billy, a guard from a merchant caravan that just came to Flashgold Town, that a band of pirates called Black Sails have landed. They seem to be afraid to attack the county town, mainly targeting nearby small towns. I've heard that the fishing port town, which is closest to the sea, suffered heavy losses. Even the town's sheriff was killed." Bushy Brows continued. "No way. Aren't town sheriffs usually potential knights? Are the pirates that powerful?" the baker's child asked, dumbfounded. "Yes, the Black Sails pirates are very strong. Moreover, I've heard that our town's sheriff, Lord Kuzma, is being transferred to become the sheriff of Fishing Port Town. Additionally, the new sheriff coming to our town, supposedly from the county town, is a lord. Seems his name is Lord Hamilton. I'm not quite sure. It should be that name." Freckles agreed and additionally revealed a big piece of news, earning Rain's approval, truly proving himself to be a well-informed person. "Oh, you heard about that news too. Seems like it's true then." Bushy Brows nodded at Freckles. "Right, Fishing Port Town isn't far from Flashgold Town either, just about 2 days' journey. Do you think the pirates might attack our town?" Freckles continued to express his worries. "Don't worry. Pirates usually hit the seashore and then leave. They won't venture deeper inland. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called pirates," Bushy Brows reassured. The amount of information was a bit overwhelming. Rain was stunned as he listened, almost losing his grip on the horseshoe in his hand. Meanwhile, Master Baal asked with concern, "Rain, if you're too tired, take a break." Rain had been very enthusiastic about learning these past few days, and his talent was quite impressive. Baal noticed this, and his impression of Rain had improved a great deal. Diligence can always inadvertently change people's perceptions of someone. "It's okay, I can keep going for a bit longer." Rain shook his head, declining Baal's kind gesture. Every opportunity to improve a skill must be grasped firmly, otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of this golden finger? However, the matter with the pirates ultimately touched Rain a bit. It seemed this world wasn't so peaceful. He needed to become stronger as quickly as possible. So, George found that his good friend Rain's enthusiasm for work seemed even higher than the day before. Throughout the day, he barely rested at all, constantly helping with pressing horseshoes, then intently watching Master Baal nailing horseshoes. This kind of passion for learning was simply beyond understanding. After continuously nailing horseshoes for 2 days, at this moment, Rain stared blankly at his skill hoof trimming LV1, 99/100. "It seems today I can elevate the hoof trimming skill to the next level. Just not sure what changes will occur once it upgrades to LV2. Rain didn't have to wait long, as he watched Baal making a horseshoe flawlessly smooth. The long-awaited system prompt finally appeared. "You assisted in nailing horseshoes. Comprehension related to the skill increased. Your skill hoof trimming has been elevated. Experience +1. Congratulations. Your skill hoof trimming has been upgraded to LV2. Looking at hoof trimming LV2, 1/300. Suddenly, Rain felt like he had a slightly different understanding of the task. It seemed as if there were fragmented memories in his mind, almost as if he had been trimming hooves for months. When Rain once again watched Baal trim the hooves, he felt he could understand a bit more. For example, why Baal's wrist needed to flick just so when trimming at the most curved part of the hoof, or why Baal needed to shake slightly when using the iron spade to scrape off excess from the hoof. Everything was so natural, falling into place seamlessly. Rain had a feeling that although his strength hadn't increased, he seemed to be able to start working on trimming hooves. He couldn't yet do the whole task of nailing horseshoes, but he could try trimming hooves. Even though proposing this to Master Baal seemed a bit audacious, considering the fastest learning apprentices couldn't yet do it independently. But to gain more experience, the secret might be in getting hands on himself. Rain glanced at the blacksmith apprentice LV1 in his occupation panel and the experience bar, 22/100, right below it, and muttered, "What a pity." It seemed that upgrading skills was easier than elevating his profession level. He estimated that, at the current pace, it would take at least 5 more days to increase the level of his blacksmith apprentice profession. After some hesitation, Rain spoke up. "Master Ball, could I try trimming the hooves? I feel like I can manage it." Ball looked at Rain, evaluated his expression carefully, and upon confirming that Rain wasn't joking and recalling Rain's efforts over the past few days, he nodded and said, "All right, go ahead and give it a try." At this, all the apprentices were astonished, thinking, he's only been learning for a few days and he's got it. Even the resting pseudo-rich kids stopped their casual chat and turned their attention to Rain, although their goal was not to become the manor's blacksmith apprentice. This act of showing off was clearly intolerable for them. What the hell is Rain up to, trying to show off? Damn it, we've got to give him a good beating tonight. The thick-browed boy spat out the stalk of grass from his mouth and cursed angrily. Just trying to catch Ball's attention the way he's sucking up. "FK, we need to properly teach him a lesson tonight," the freckled boy chimed in. When Rain's right hand grasped the sharp iron shovel passed to him by the donkey hoof master, he misjudged the weight of the shovel. He lost his balance all at once. This immediately drew another burst of laughter from the pretentious rich kids. It seemed like they were mocking Rain for overestimating his abilities. Rain's face also turned red. He had only misjudged the weight of the shovel. It wasn't that he couldn't lift it at all. Ball, standing nearby, also slightly shook his head, seemingly not optimistic about Rain's ability to fix the hoof properly. After all, Rain's slender physique meant his strength was quite limited. "Rain, you." George, standing beside him, also felt that Rain's actions were too impulsive, making himself the butt of jokes among the other boys. This made George, as a good friend, feel somewhat unable to hold his head high. But the friendship between young boys is relatively simple, and George didn't say anything. Instead, he put all his effort into holding the hoof down for Rain. Rain nodded at George without saying much. With George's robust pressing, Rain didn't need to expend too much strength to stabilize the hoof with his left hand. And although his right hand's manipulation of the shovel was still somewhat unfamiliar and unsmooth, he basically managed to trim off the burrs cleanly. Expertise is apparent the moment one begins. Ball, who was watching nearby, immediately lit up and thought to himself, "Not bad." Although this young man, Rain, is somewhat frail, he indeed knows the trick to trimming hooves, making use of the weight of the shovel to trim along the contour of the hoof. The pretentious kids fell silent. It was apparent to everyone that Rain had truly learned how to trim hooves. Although he was a little inexperienced, that was only in comparison to Master Ball. George's eyes widened as he watched Rain trimming the donkey's hooves, unable to look away. "My God! Rain, you just learned this a few days ago, and you already can do it. That's really amazing." Upon hearing George's praise of Rain, Freckle's face seemed quite disdainful, saying, "PFFT, what's there to be proud of? It's just shoeing a hoof, not swordsmanship." Seeing Rain truly drawing attention to himself, the pretentious rich kids felt even more annoyed inside. Rain, however, paid no attention to everything happening around him. At this moment, his mind was already captivated by the system notifications. "You've performed hoof trimming, insight improved. Your skill in trimming hooves has improved. Experience +5, you focused on trimming hooves. Blacksmith Apprentice Professional Experience Points +2, SSS. Getting hands-on actually gives this much experience." It was just as he had guessed. If he continued at this pace, leveling up his Blacksmith Apprentice profession level is just around the corner. There's no need to wait. It's very possible that today, he would be able to level up his Blacksmith Apprentice profession to LV2. After finishing all 4 hooves, Rain was sweating profusely, but his eyes were sparkling brightly. "Not bad, Rain. You can trim hooves independently now," Ball said, nodding his head in approval of Rain's skills. "Thank you, Master Ball," Rain nodded emphatically. "And you all, if you want to compete for the Blacksmith Apprentice position, then learn seriously." Ball turned and bellowed at the child servants with a stern face. In the face of Ball, the pretentious kids naturally didn't dare show their temper, but their glances toward Rain turned much more vicious. If previously they didn't care about Rain's diligence because they felt superior, Now Rain had gained Master Ball's recognition and had made a name for himself in silence. This was something they couldn't stand. At lunchtime, Rain felt a tense atmosphere around him. Apart from his close friend George, even the other boys from commoner families didn't talk to Rain. Or was it agitation by the pretentious kids? Rain wasn't sure, but he wasn't concerned about it. He wouldn't slow down his pace of becoming stronger just because of some people's opinions. The pretentious kids, however, had major issues with Rain taking the spotlight. Rain, they can't stand to see you do well. George saw what was going on and said reassuringly, I know, George, don't worry, I'm fine. It was inevitable to encounter such situations once he started to stand out. With his golden finger, that day was bound to come sooner or later. In his previous life, Rain had long been accustomed to this kind of situation. Workplace suppression, the principle is the same. In the afternoon, the child servants continued their task of nailing horseshoes. After Rain finished trimming the hooves, Master Ball would nail the horseshoes on. The work of one was divided in two, so naturally Ball felt much more relieved, and his gaze towards Rain grew increasingly approving. As evening approached, Rain finally received the system notification for profession-level advancement. You've performed hoof trimming work, insight improved. Your skill in trimming hooves has improved, experience +5, you focused on fixing horseshoes. Blacksmith Apprentice Professional Experience Points +2, congratulations. Your Blacksmith Apprentice profession level has increased. Blacksmith Apprentice leveled up. Rain couldn't help but be overjoyed. He couldn't wait to flip to the second page of the transparent frame, carefully checking it out. Blacksmith Apprentice LV2. 0/300, fixing horseshoes LV2. 255/300, nailing horseshoes LV1, 45/100, remaining attribute points. 1 remaining skill points. 1. Even though Rain knew his profession level would increase today, actually seeing this scene still makes it hard for him to contain his inner joy. Moreover, the fixing horseshoes skill seems about to step into level 3 soon. However, these are not the most important things. The important part is, at this moment, the panel at the bottom is showing attribute points, 1, and skill points, 1. This is the biggest gain from the Blacksmith Apprentice. Profession level increase. Leveling up just to get stronger. No, it's because of my effort that I have these points, so it's not leveling up to get stronger, it's effort getting stronger. After some thought, Rain flipped the transparent frame back to the first page, which is the attribute page. Profession, Blacksmith Apprentice LV2. Clearly, Rain's strength attribute is the lowest. There's no helping it, with such a thin build, his strength naturally is weak. But now it's different. Regarding how to allocate attribute points, Rain felt there was nothing to hesitate about. First, to bolster his weaknesses. Didn't want to be seen as weak any longer, nor did he want to be bullied. Adding points to strength was the inevitable choice at this stage. 1 point in strength might not be enough, but it at least gave him some ability to fight back. After a brief consideration, Rain added 1 point to his strength. Strength instantly became 5. Suddenly, Rain felt a warm current surge from his heart, spreading to his limbs and throughout his body, making him feel as comfortable as if he was soaking in a hot spring, with all the fatigue vanishing in an instant. Moreover, the increase of a single point in strength made Rain feel as if his body was brimming with energy enough to fight through several hundred horseshoes without taking a break. Does adding points rejuvenate your state? This effect is incredible. Next were the skill points. Rain was about to add a point to nailing horseshoes when he suddenly stopped. If every level up in profession level only gives 1 skill point, it must be quite precious. Rain noticed that upgrading the Blacksmith Apprentice profession level from LV2 to LV3 now required 300 points of experience, up from the original 100. This implies that the difficulty of leveling up is increasing. I haven't yet been exposed to other skills of the Blacksmith Apprentice. If I learn a skill that is extremely difficult to improve, like forging weapons or something, wouldn't it be better to add points then? After a moment's thought, Rain decided to save this 1 skill point for later. Rain, returning to the scene, was in such high spirits that it surprised everyone. One could see that with his increased strength, Rain's efficiency in trimming horseshoes had improved by at least 20%. Although still not up to Ball's level compared to the beginning, this was a significant improvement. The servant children closest to Rain were gaping in astonishment. At dinner, Rain ate 3.5 brick-sized black bread loaves and had 3 servings of vegetable soup, even licking the soup pot clean, a scene that left the rest of the servant children dumbfounded. Rain found that after adding 1 point to strength, the increase was genuinely significant, but he also got hungry very quickly. After eating his fill, Rain, returning to the dormitory, was blocked by bushy brows and freckles. "Rain, you've done well today, showing off quite a bit." Bushy Brows stepped forward, patting Rain's face with a challenging expression. "Damn it, I had to endure yesterday, but today is different." Rain's eyes suddenly turned from gentle to fierce. With all his might, Rain slapped Bushy Brows across the face. Immediately it rang in Bushy Brows' head, causing him to stagger and nearly fall to the ground. The slap left Freckles and a few onlookers, the fake rich second generations, stunned, their minds racing with how Rain dared to strike. And Bushy Brows, he was so shocked by Rain's slap that he took a while to recover. But this was just the beginning. With a powerful knee thrust, Rain hit Bushy Brows in the stomach, right under the diaphragm, making him vomit his dinner all over the place. A sour stench immediately spread out. "Get him, beat up that brat Rain." He dared to fight back. Freckles shouted, and the surrounding rich kids rushed up, starting to beat up Rain. But Rain, heedless of everything, tucked his head in and kept swinging his fists at the vomiting Bushy Brows with lethal determination. This ruthless fierceness was truly frightening. However, the incident here was quickly reported by other child servants. Soon after, a steward of the manor arrived, and the fighters were promptly separated. Coincidentally, this particular steward happened to be distantly related to the Rain family. As a result, both Rain and the thick-browed servant received 50 heavy strikes each and were punished with sweeping and mopping for a week. At the same time, a bruised and swollen Rain was transferred to George's dormitory. But obviously, this matter was far from over. The thick-browed servant was tall and muscular. He had never expected Rain to launch a sneak attack, and he was caught off guard. However, by that evening, he had come to his senses, and his eyes were bloodshot with rage. As the bully among the child servants, he had never suffered such a loss before. The next day, while nailing horseshoes, the thick-browed servant glared at Rain with a murderous look. "Thick Brows, how do you plan on getting revenge?" a freckled servant beside him asked. Hearing this, the other pseudo-nobility child servants also turned their attention to the thick-browed servant. He had, in fact, already thought of a plan. In the manner, if he fought with Rain again, both would certainly be punished, and they might even be directly dismissed, which would be a loss not worth taking. Swordsmanship training starts next week, and I've heard there will be sparring sessions. At that time, that kid will suffer, Thick Brows said through gritted teeth. "Wow, Thick Brows, you've learned swordsmanship. That's incredible." "Not bad. I studied with my uncle for 2 years. I'll make sure to beat him so badly that even his mother won't recognize him." Thick Brows clenched his fist, showing his firm confidence. Unlike Thick Brows, Rain was currently sweating profusely as he trimmed hooves and explained the intricacies of the task to the other child servants. For instance, one should utilize the weight of the hoof rasp itself, trimming along the contour of the hoof. This attracted many child servants aspiring to be blacksmith apprentices to Rain. And as a result, Rain successfully divided the child servants, who had originally been instigated by the pseudo-nobility. A great man in his previous life had said, "Make many friends and few enemies." Worried that the child servants would learn and surpass him, if one has a golden finger, why fear being surpassed by others? They might as well go to sleep. As long as one progresses faster than others, they will never have to worry about being overtaken. After finishing with the last horse in the stables, Rain wiped his sweat and opened his profession panel to check. Blacksmith apprentice LV2, 27/300. There was still a way to go before his profession level, as a blacksmith apprentice would increase to LV3, but Rain was already quite satisfied with his current progress. Hoof trimming LV2, 295/300, nailing horseshoes LV1, 56/100, remaining skill points. As for this one skill point, Rain had already decided not to use it for the time being. At present, whether it was hoof trimming or nailing horseshoes, improving these skills was just a matter of time. As long as he had enough time, Rain would be able to easily level them up. Therefore, the later the skill point was used, the higher its cost-effectiveness would be. Moreover, since all the horses in the stable now had their horseshoes nailed, would clearly be foolish to add a point to upgrade the skill of nailing horseshoes right now. He would wait until a skill became hard to level up or required a massive amount of experience to level up before using this skill point. Just then, a middle-aged man dressed in a neat gray linen robe came over to the child servants, apparently with an announcement. According to the memories of his original body, this man was a formal servant of the Habsburg Manor, responsible for arranging the training of child servants. He greeted Ball and then coughed twice before saying, "Tomorrow is Sunday, and you'll have a day of rest. After a while, you may go home on your own, and be sure to return to the manor on time tomorrow evening. From the day after tomorrow, you will start practicing basic swordsmanship. Mr. Humbert, a manor guard, will teach you then. I hope you take this opportunity to study earnestly." The child servants' training included 1 day of rest per week, coinciding with the day of church services, with the other 6 days spent within the manor. After speaking, the middle-aged man walked away with an air of composure. However, the words of the middle-aged man immediately ignited the child servants' enthusiasm, like pouring oil into a fierce fire. The voices of the child servants discussing the news suddenly grew louder. "Rain, did you hear that? We're going to start swordsmanship training." George grabbed Rain's arm and said with longing, "Of course I heard. I'm excited too." "Let's work hard together, young man," Rain replied with a smile. The pseudo-nobility child servants were also thrilled, because they knew that next week's swordsmanship lessons would be the time when the bushy-browed teacher would give Rain a harsh lesson. They were expecting quite a show. Clearly, the past few days had not been joyous for the pretenders. Rain's brilliance had overshadowed them, but they didn't care much about it. A genius at fixing donkeys' hooves and nailing horseshoes, but swordsmanship is different. As for next week's basic swordsmanship training, Rain was naturally as excited as any normal boy would be. After all, which boy doesn't love the excitement of swinging a sword and engaging in battle? But he was even more curious whether the swordsmanship training would trigger a new panel, such as a swordsman, guard, or warrior panel. However, right now, he was not thinking about swordsmanship training, because he was about to go home and see his original parents. Not only his parents, but the original owner of the body also had a 7-year-old sister. All at once, Rain couldn't help but think of his parents from his previous life and wondered how they were doing. For a moment, Rain's eyes held a touch of melancholy. Just then, George came over, glanced at the second-generation kids, and asked, "By the way, Rain, what are you planning to do after you get home tomorrow? Want to join me in gathering nuts in the woods?" Rain, pulled from his thoughts, considered it. That might be a good idea to clear his head, and besides, it was autumn, just the right time when the ground was covered with nuts. Nuts are rich in nutrition and would be perfect for replenishing the nutrients his body needed. According to the memory of the original body, there were not many nuts to be picked in the town's public woodland. Since it was a public forest, the town's residents had already scoured it day by day. Before Rain could ask anything, George looked around, leaned in, and whispered, "Rain, let's go to the Habsburg Manor's woodland. There are plenty of nuts there. Ranger Gilliam Uncle is my relative. It's fine if we go quietly, but you mustn't tell anyone else." So that was George's plan. Not bad, the kid has potential. Rain gave a slight smile and said, "All right, it's settled then." The town's forests were divided into 2 types. One was the public woodland, where everyone could gather firewood, nuts, and hunt. The other was the manor's woodland, belonging to the Harrisburg Manor, where ordinary people were not allowed to engage in such activities. What George was suggesting was for the 2 of them to secretly go to the manor's woodland and pick nuts. At dusk, with a pleasant breeze, Rain walked home alone. George had already gone home earlier. Rain's home was located to the south of the town, directly opposite the Harrisburg Manor to the north. This meant that to get home, Rain practically had to cross the most bustling street of the town. This one is a bakery. This one is an inn, the Freckled family's inn. It seemed that every segment of the road he passed, and every familiar shop he saw triggered memories of the original host to flood in, slowly merging with Rain's own memories. However, as he passed the town square and saw a crowd of town residents gathered around the notice board, curiosity made him take a look as well. All over the board there were many wanted posters, and one with the nickname Scarface was newly posted. The man had shoulder-length yellow hair, a horse-like face, and a scar that slanted across his face from the forehead, passing his nose and ending at his right cheek. Crimes: raped 3 women in Petertown, repeatedly robbed passers-by, and is suspected to be linked to the recent frequent disappearances of children. Reward: 5 Imperial Gold Coins. Note: the reward can be claimed at any town or higher jurisdiction constabulary with his corpse or head. Hiss. 5 Imperial Gold Coins. Rain's eyes lit up. With that money, I could. But then Rain shook his head, sighed, and dismissed the somewhat unrealistic idea. Continuing his walk home, this one is the blacksmith shop. I could go to the blacksmith shop in town to work. And at the same time, I would be able to gain the professional experience of a blacksmith apprentice. According to the memories of the original owner of this body, the blacksmith and owner of the shop, Boris, was stingy. Unless you were an experienced assistant, if you wanted to learn any craft, you had to pay a considerable apprenticeship fee, which seemed to be 5 or maybe 10 silver coins. At this stage, Rain's family definitely couldn't afford that sum of money. It seemed I needed to think of other methods. Auntie Seema, hello. Little Rain, hello. After working as a young servant for a week, I feel like you've grown more spirited and robust. Auntie Seema greeted Rain warmly, as she was quite familiar with Rain's mother. At first, Rain thought that Auntie Seema was just being courteous. But when he lifted his arm and looked at his previously skinny limbs, he now saw muscles starting to protrude slightly, especially the biceps. Rain immediately lifted his clothing to check his abdomen and could vaguely make out the shape of a six-pack forming. You should know that although skinny people could easily have defined abs, the original body definitely had none, not even a shadow of them. But now, with a little more exercise, I might develop visible abs soon. Looking at it this way, the effect of that little bit of added strength was indeed immediate. Rain stopped in front of a 2-story house with a triangular roof. The roof of the house was slanted, covered with thatch, and apart from the mud walls around it, the rest of the structure was made of wood. There was some open space in front of and behind the house, where some green onions and vegetables were planted. A woman was bending over. Pulling something from the ground, feeling someone approaching, she straightened up. Rain, is that you, Rain, coming back? Looking at the woman's kind and dignified face, a flood of related memories surged forth. Scenes of warmth played like slideshows in Rain's mind, prompting him to blurt out, "Mother, it's me, I'm back. Let me see, you've gotten stronger after a few days without seeing you. It seems that the manor takes good care of you servant children's meals," Mother Emma said with a smile as she hugged Rain. In an instant, Rain felt an inexplicable surge of emotion. He didn't know if this feeling was a natural reaction of this body, or a kind of instinct inherent to all humans, but he knew that this emotion came from the heart, from deep within the soul. The woman was the mother of the original owner of this body, and now she was his mother too. "Brother, is that brother coming back?" Pretty little girl with long hair suddenly ran in from the backyard, her hand still holding a bunch of green onions. In an instant, Rain overlaid the memory of a little girl named Bo-He over the scene before him. This was Bo-He, his sister. Bo-He. Rain picked up his sister, spun her around, making Bo-He giggle non-stop. Before long, Rain's father also came back, a simple-looking, burly man with a square face, though his forehead had many wrinkles, which made it seem like he spent a lot of time worrying. Seeing Rain, he showed a slight smile and with his calloused, thick palms, patted Rain's shoulder, saying, "Rain, you've grown sturdy. It looks like you've even grown a bit taller." "Father, you've worked hard." Rain hugged his father tightly. Although old Rain didn't know why his son was suddenly so emotional, he still laughed and returned the hug. The family of 4 sat around a wooden table cozily, having dinner together. The dinner consisted of a portion of cured pork, a large bowl of mashed potatoes, a few slices of rye bread, and a bottle of milk. In an ordinary commoner's household, this was considered a feast. Clearly, this was because today was the day Rain had come home. Usually, old Rain wouldn't indulge in such good food, but after Rain wolfed down his share, he realized he was only half full. He was in a period of rapid physical growth and naturally had a big appetite. There was an old saying, "Growing lad will empty his father's lad," and ever since Rain added that point to his attribute, it seemed like it had drained the last bit of nutritional reserves from his body. These past 2 days, Rain felt he could eat a lot more. Moreover, there was a constant craving for meat swirling in his mind. So, after finishing his own portion, Rain couldn't help swallowing his saliva and forced himself to look away from the food. The mother glanced over and immediately sensed something. "Rain, are you still hungry? Here, take these 2 slices of cured meat from me, I'm full." "Brother, I'm still little. This mashed potato is for you." Little Bo, he pushed a bowl of mashed potatoes toward Rain. Rain from my side. Old Rain also said. Witnessing this scene before him, Rain was deeply moved. If before his efforts were due to his desire as a person from another world to change the status quo and his longing for this transcendent world. But from this moment on, another deep, vivid stroke was added to Rain's motivation. In the end, Rain accepted the cured meat and mashed potatoes from his mother and Little Bo but refused the bread from his father. Because he knew that his father, who did manual labor, needed the nutrition even more than him. That night, Rain slept very soundly. The next morning, Old Rain declined Rain's offer to help in the fields and left home early. The mother also went to work at the inn in the small town. Only Rain and his sister Bo were left at home. When Rain followed his sister's voice to the small courtyard, he found Bo planting carrots with a girl in their own yard. "Brother, you're up." "I am planting carrots with Sister Anna," Bo greeted with a smile. That's right, she was their neighbor. A quiet and reticent young girl, it was said that she came to live in Flashgold Town with her mother. But a year ago, her mother mysteriously disappeared. Now, she lives alone in the wooden cabin next to Rain's house. The girl turned her head, her facial contours were beautiful, but her complexion was wan. She seemed to be chronically malnourished, with her pale yellow hair a bit dry and split, but the deep brown pupils revealed a strong beauty. Rain, hello," the girl greeted with her head down, shy and reserved. In age, Rain seemed to be a few months older than the girl. To his recollection, the girl had always been this afraid of strangers. Just as Rain was thinking of helping them, his close friend George called from the door, "Rain, let's go pick nuts." "Brother, I want to go too," Bo excitedly said upon hearing that Rain was going to pick nuts. From the side, Anna seemed to have a longing look in her eyes. But after thinking it over, Rain still refused since they were going to Habsburg Manor's woods, and he was only able to go because he was with George. If he brought others along, it would be inappropriate. So Rain shook his head and said, "Bo, stay at home with Sister Anna. I'll bring back nuts for you." "Okay, Bo," he said pitifully, unwilling but still obediently complied. Indeed, the children of a poor family become responsible at an early age. Such a young age, yet so sensible. Rain patted Little Bo's head and then left with George. After walking for a while, George suddenly said with a puzzled face, "Rain, why is your sister with Anna? Haven't you heard? She's an unlucky person." "An unlucky person?" Rain asked, confused. "I heard it by chance from my father. Anna's mother didn't just disappear. It seemed like she was taken away, but I'm not clear on the details," George said, glancing around to check if anyone was nearby before speaking in hushed tones. "You mustn't let this slip." "Who took her away?" Rain asked, still puzzled. "I really don't know about that." George's answer was also vague. "By the way, Rain, have you heard? Recently on the north side of our town, 2 commoner families' children have disappeared. Remember to warn Bo not to wander off when there's no need." "Huh? Is that so? Wasn't it said that the disappearances of children were happening in other towns and that our Flashgold Town was safe? Is it spreading now?" Rain was quite surprised. "I'm not so sure about that." George pondered, as it was another question touching upon his own knowledge gap. By the time the 2 of them returned to their homes, Rain's hands were filled with a full basket of wild blueberries, hazelnuts, and chestnuts. It was thanks to George's help that they could sneak into the manor's forest and gather various nuts and berries. About 70% of the forests surrounding the town belonged to the Habsburg Manor, while the remaining 30% were public woodland. However, the wild fruits and nuts in the public woods had already been picked clean by the townspeople. It was already time for lunch, and the autumn sun was exceptionally warm. When Rain was approaching his house, he could already see the white smoke rising from his chimney from afar, which made him feel really good. However, when he caught a glimpse of his neighbor's house from the corner of his eye, he stopped in his tracks. He saw a young girl dressed in a gray linen coat, sitting on the wooden steps of her house, basking in the sunlight while carefully nibbling on a piece of bran bread. Even though it was bran bread, inferior to even black bread, the girl cherished each bite. With one hand she held the bran bread, and with the other she caught the falling crumbs to put them into her mouth, not wanting to waste a single bit. After a few bites, the girl in the sunlight squinted her eyes, seemingly content just to have a piece of bran bread to eat. Rain stood frozen in place, staring dully at how carefully she ate, and his heart suddenly felt a tight pull. How much misfortune must one endure to find such happiness in eating a piece of bran bread? Rain looked down at the wild fruits in his hand and moved his lips as if to say something but was unsure what to say. He was not familiar with the girl. Offering nuts and such out of the blue might not be welcomed. After some thought, Rain went into his room and poured out half of the gathered wild fruits and nuts, then handed the remaining half basket to his sister Bohi. Bohi, go take this half basket of wild fruits to Sister Anna next door and make sure she accepts it. Rain crouched down, patted Bohi's little head and said. It seemed from her brother's serious gaze that Bohi understood something, and she nodded vigorously, saying, Yeah, Sister Anna lives alone and it's really tough for her. She will definitely like these wild fruits. Don't worry, brother, I will make sure Sister Anna accepts them. If she doesn't, I'll cry. Bohi fluttered her big eyes and waved her small hand forcefully. Soon after, Bohi came running back with excitement on her face. Brother, Sister Anna accepted it. She told me to thank you, and we've agreed to continue planting in the garden this afternoon. That's great, Bohi. Hearing that Anna accepted the gift eased Rain's concern, and he gave his sister a thumbs up. Complimenting her, after lunch, Rain headed toward the blacksmith shop in Flashgold Town. The blacksmith shop was on the main road of the town, and even before Rain got close, he could hear the ding-ding-dong-dong of the blacksmithing from a distance. As soon as he entered the blacksmith shop, Rain immediately felt a wave of heat rush over him. Inside, several sturdy men were bustling about in the manner of helpers and apprentices, while blacksmith Boris Patton was forging a pot. A few apprentices looked puzzled as Rain approached Boris. Uncle Boris, might I help around in the shop? I'm willing to do anything. At the sound of his voice, Boris turned his head to look over. He looked Rain up and down and said, So it's young Rain, huh? You seem to have grown stouter, but I'm sorry, the blacksmith shop doesn't need more hands now. Hey, Uncle Boris. I'd like to help for free, just assign me any task. Was there such a good deal? Blacksmith Boris was initially stunned at the offer, then his gaze focused back on Rain, eyes blazing as he pondered what task to give him. A task that wouldn't let Rain learn any trade secrets, yet would make good use of this offer of free labor. That's when an apprentice blacksmith nearby heard this and raised an eyebrow, suggesting, Master, have Rain help with the bellows then. Boris glanced at him, thought for a moment, and decided that the bellows was a good idea, requiring no special skills but just some strength. All right then. Rain, remember not to mess with anything in the shop. You'll be in charge of the bellows this afternoon. Drews, you show Rain how to do it. Rain certainly had no objections, the bellows it was, as long as there was experience. If shoeing a donkey could raise a blacksmith apprentice's experience, all the more so with operating the bellows. Seated in front of the bellows, Rain vigorously pulled on the bellows under Drews's guidance. A few burly apprentices nearby glanced at Rain, thinking his skinny arms and legs probably wouldn't manage more than a few pulls. But once Rain got a grip on the basic technique of the bellows, he began to tirelessly pull away. You've worked at the bellows, comprehension has improved. You have learned a new skill. Bellows operation. Rain felt a surge of joy in his heart. It was as he had anticipated. Subsequently, almost every pull of the bellows added +1 to the experience. The blacksmith apprentice's professional experience points also quickly showed a +1 notification. This made Rain unable to hide his elation. Suddenly, Rain started pulling like a perpetual motion machine. The other apprentices looked on with surprise at Rain. They couldn't understand why a mechanical, monotonous task could inspire such enthusiasm in the new kid. The point where he did it with such gusto. Didn't this damn kid know what volunteering meant? Was there really a need to be more zealous than they, the official blacksmith apprentices? It was indeed a rare sight. Rain continued until nightfall. The number of breaks he took in the meantime could be counted on the fingers of one hand. This earned him a new look of respect from the blacksmith Boris. At the same time, Boris took the opportunity to give several blacksmith apprentices a tongue lashing, saying a lot about how they should learn from Rain and such. Suddenly, the blacksmith apprentices glanced at each other, seeing a sense of urgency in each other's eyes. Though the work of a blacksmith apprentice was hard, the conditions were top-notch compared to apprentices in other trades. They didn't say it aloud, but they valued it greatly in their hearts. Immediately, they all sped up their pace. Watching this unfold, blacksmith Boris couldn't help but laugh. He had not expected that by agreeing to let Rain take on the task of operating the bellows, such an unintended effect would occur. It wasn't long before Rain received a system notification about a profession-level upgrade. You have worked at the bellows, comprehension has improved. Your skill in bellows operation has improved, experience +3. You have focused on the bellows, Blacksmith Apprentice Professional Experience Points +1. Congratulations, your Blacksmith Apprentice profession level has been raised. Eagerly flipping to the second page of the transparent box, Rain scrutinized it carefully. The first entry on the panel showed that the Blacksmith Apprentice had risen to level 3. Blacksmith Apprentice LV3. 0/500, Bellows Operation LV2. 245/300, Hoof Repair LV2, 295/300, Nailing Horseshoes LV1, 56/100, remaining attribute points, 1 remaining skill points. 2. Even though Rain knew his profession level might very well rise today, the actual sight of it still made it hard for him to suppress his inner joy. Even though he was working for free at Boris's forge. This time, the added 1 attribute point and 1 skill point at the bottom of the attribute panel right now were the best rewards for his voluntary work. Evening, exhausted Rain bid farewell to blacksmith Boris and returned to the Habsburg Manor. After hastily taking care of dinner, he fell asleep deeply in the dormitory. The next morning, the young servants were gathered together, and they were greeted by a tall and burly man walking towards them. This burly man had blonde hair stiff like the bristles of a wild boar, thick brows over big eyes, a resolute face, and a bastard sword hanging at his waist, which gave him a very steady presence when he walked. "I am your swordsmanship instructor, Humbert. What you will be learning is the basic swordsmanship that all militia must master. Has anyone among you learned swordsmanship before?" Having said this, the burly man scanned the group with his large eyes. Only George somewhat excitedly raised his right hand, saying, "Reporting to Instructor Humbert, I've learned." "What kind of swordsmanship? For how long?" "Basic swordsmanship as well, for about 2 years, I guess." George seemed to recall his learning process, his intermittent practice amounting to about 2 years in total. He had intended to understate the amount of practice to highlight his natural talent for swordsmanship, but under Humbert's piercing gaze, he ended up revealing the truth. Humbert nodded and said, "Anyone else? If no one else will, then you. Come up here and demonstrate the basic swordsmanship you've learned." "Oh, me, demonstrate. All right." Clearly, George was a bit nervous facing the robust instructor Humbert. After taking the iron wooden sword that Humbert handed him, George took up a swordsmanship starting pose and began to hack and chop vigorously. The servants, having never learned basic swordsmanship, watched with great interest, thinking that George executed the basic swordsmanship quite well. "Stop, not bad, you may step down," Humbert said with a slight frown, waving his hand. Oh, okay, instructor." George, having received praise from the instructor, was visibly elated. However, Rain could see that Humbert did not seem satisfied with George's demonstration of basic swordsmanship. Rain, however, thought to himself that George was quite good, both in terms of strength and proficiency with the techniques, at least far better than himself. Because he hadn't learned basic swordsmanship. George returned to the group with a smile, seemingly very delighted that he had received the instructor's praise on the first day of swordsmanship training. The group of servants, led by Humbert, headed to the training ground in the middle of the outer courtyard. The real second-generation kids did not come today. This was the servants' first time at the training ground, and they couldn't help looking around curiously. Under the awning, there were blunt two-handed swords, one-handed swords, shields, riding spears, and all sorts of training gear like training armor and thick padded jackets, but all these had nothing to do with the servants. The instructor led them to a place with only wooden short swords hanging, pointed, and said, "There. Each of you take a short sword, and after you've got it, line up." Suddenly, the group noisily went up and each person took a sword. "What's this?" "Wooden swords, a child's toy. My 5-year-old brother plays with this kind of thing," Freckles said disdainfully, looking at the wooden sword. "George, the swordsmanship you just did was quite something. I feel like you're much better than me." Freckles, have you also learned basic swordsmanship before?" George asked, surprised. "Of course, my uncle is a mercenary. I learned a bit from him since I was young, but I've nearly forgotten it all," Freckles boasted with pride. After all, in his opinion, when it came to swordsmanship among all the young servants, he was the second strongest after George. "Not bad, George and Freckles. It looks like you two are going to shine," the baker's son exclaimed admiringly. "Yeah, and now a certain someone can't attract attention by fixing hooves anymore, right? Men should be all about physical strength." Freckles glanced sideways at Rain and said, "You." George was becoming impatient to hear more, but Rain shook his head, dismissing George's desire to argue with the others. After all, it was just idle talk, and he didn't lose anything from it. Arguing with a bunch of fake second generations was pointless. And who said that if you have a foundation in swordsmanship, I definitely couldn't catch up? Rain glanced at the 2 skill points reserved on his panel, his eyes flickering. This wooden sword isn't quite what I expected," Rain exclaimed as he grasped the wooden sword, his eyes immediately lighting up. This wooden sword seemed to be made of oil-soaked ironwood. Not only was it tough and durable, but its weight was also nearly the same as a real iron sword, making it the best possible training sword. Indeed, as the group of pretentious nobles got hold of the swords, they too realized the truth. "I knew it. How could the Earl's family use ordinary wooden swords? So they are made of ironwood after all." Once all the pages had an ironwood sword in hand, the swordsmanship instructor Humbert began to shout loudly, "Now, I will demonstrate the basic sword techniques you need to master. Basic sword technique number 1, striding thrust. Basic sword technique number 2, striding downward slash. Basic sword technique number 3, striding upward sweep." The basic sword techniques consisted of these 3 moves, but Humbert's actions were much quicker and more powerful than those of the thick-browed boy. The same set of movements had a world of difference when executed by the 2 of them. The pages watched Humbert's demonstration attentively, and following his teachings, soon began to swing their ironwood swords, trying to imitate him. Without trying, one would never know. Once they tried, they were shocked. Although the 3 movements of basic swordsmanship seemed simple, they were still quite difficult for most pages, including Rain, who had never practiced swordsmanship in either of his lives. They needed to not only swing the sword properly, but also coordinate their steps, syncing hands and feet together. Such bodily coordination couldn't be achieved without a lot of practice and wouldn't come together in a short time. And so, under the scorching sun, a group of young lads sweated profusely, roaring as they tirelessly swung their ironwood swords, practicing the basic sword techniques. Do you want to be able to survive when facing danger? Humbert corrected each person's movements while shouting words of encouragement with his robust voice. It seemed he was quite accustomed to this method of training. Yes, a group of boys who had never been sweet-talked couldn't help but respond passionately and in unison. "Good, according to the key points of the movements I just mentioned. Practice repeatedly. Keep practicing. Turn it into a natural instinct of the body." Humbert continued to encourage the group of pages while also starting to explain the key points of the basic sword techniques. The striding thrust emphasizes the use of leg strength to transmit the power from the lower half of the body through the waist to the arm wielding the sword. It's essential to master the linkage of the muscles throughout the body. You have practiced the basic swordsmanship, and your comprehension has improved. You have grasped a new skill, basic swordsmanship. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has improved. Experience +1. Congratulations. You have triggered the career panel militia. Shouldn't it be swordsman or guard? The fact that I've triggered just the militia career panel. Rain felt both joy and disappointment at this moment. The joy was because he had finally triggered a combat career panel, no longer having to rely solely on the blacksmith's apprentice lifestyle career panel, signifying a pleasing first step on the path of martial strength. The disappointment was because this combat profession seemed weak just from the sound of it. From the name, it was apparent that militia implied it wasn't any serious military force, and the strength limit must be very low. For someone with 0 foundation like me, triggering the militia panel might not be a bad thing, because it may also mean that it wouldn't be so difficult to raise my profession level. Having come to terms with it, Rain couldn't help but laugh, his disappointment vanishing. Within the transparent frame on the retina, the 3rd page can now be turned to, titled Militia, and its content is still densely packed with icons. Among so many icons, only one was lit up: basic swordsmanship. After practicing swordsmanship for a while, Rain discovered that the difficulty of improving basic swordsmanship was higher than that of nailing horseshoes on the blacksmith apprentice panel. You have trained in basic swordsmanship, and your insight has improved. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has been enhanced. Experience +1 after 2 hours. Only 1 point was gained. Basic swordsmanship LV1, 2/100. Rain roughly estimated. This means that if I practice for 8 hours a day, I would need nearly a month to possibly reach level 2. That's not right, on average. There is no way I have 8 hours of practice time. I heard that next week we'll start the dog trainer's introductory training, and the week after next will be archery training, and so on, cycling every 3 months. That means on average, I only get a week each month to practice swordsmanship. Spread out over time, that's equivalent to practicing swordsmanship for 2 hours a day, so it would take at least 3 months to have the chance to advance basic swordsmanship to level 2. Obviously, this pace of improvement was far from satisfying Rain's requirements. Because in 3 months, it would be the time for the page assessment. If there was an opportunity to tread the transcendent path with the position of a manor guard, Rain would definitely prioritize applying for the manor guard. After contemplating for a moment, Rain decided to allocate one precious skill point to basic swordsmanship to see the effect of the skill points. In this transcendent world, if I want to make a name for myself, without a doubt, being a swordsmanship genius is a better choice than being a blacksmith genius. Thus, Rain silently commanded in his mind and immediately added 1 point to basic swordsmanship. As a result, basic swordsmanship on the panel went from LV1 right arrow to basic swordsmanship LV2, 0/300. Instantly, a surge of memories related to basic swordsmanship training flowed into Rain's mind. These memories were fragmented training sequences, flashing through Rain's mind like slides and embedding into his muscle memory. When Rain opened his eyes again and executed basic swordsmanship, it was as smooth as if he had been practicing 8 hours daily for a month straight. Every strike became increasingly fluid. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has been enhanced. Experience plus when you have focused on practicing basic swordsmanship for 1 hour. Militia profession experience points plus 1 Rain noticed that after advancing basic swordsmanship to level 2, the speed of upgrading the militia profession level seemed to accelerate as well. Could it be that level 2 swordsmanship is driving the increase of the level 1 militia panel? Rain, when did you learn basic swordsmanship? That's not cool, learning basic swordsmanship behind my back. Only then did Rain realize that George, who had been practicing hard on the side, was now staring at him blankly. Just now, George had noticed that his best friend Rain was skillfully executing basic swordsmanship and couldn't help questioning it, puzzled. Rain shook his head. Of course not. Where would I get the money to learn that? George thought about it and nodded. Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's not right. Rain, you're saying you must be a swordsmanship genius. George exclaimed, his eyes wide with surprise. Shouldn't count, I just have a bit of a knack for basic swordsmanship. George thought for a moment and nodded. That's true, basic swordsmanship is only the most rudimentary introductory skill, and it doesn't mean you're a swordsmanship genius. I've heard my brother say that the nobles study family swordsmanship passed down through generations, which is much more difficult than basic swordsmanship. Oh, is that so? Rain was taken aback, but then he didn't give it much thought. After all, he had just started out with basic swordsmanship, and meals needed to be eaten 1 bite at a time. It was better to first master basic swordsmanship before anything else. A tall building rises from the ground, so Rain didn't idle away any more time and continued to sweat profusely on the side. Watching the continuous +1 in experience points, Rain was fully focused and exceedingly motivated. Even George was stunned on the side. Was this his lazy best friend? The hell, wasn't he tired? It was the same when he was fixing donkey hooves. Rain was full of determination, like a youth invigorated daily. George also kept encouraging himself, aiming to keep up with his best friend. But after a while of practicing, he realized it was really dull, tedious, tiring, and hard to keep up. At this time, the fake second-generation, rich kids nearby also noticed the changes in Rain. Bushy brow look, something's off with that kid Rain. At first he was fumbling around, but it's just been over an hour. Now he seems to have gotten the hang of it. Bushy brow followed Freckles' gaze, and after observing Rain's movements for a few moments, wore a ghost-stricken look. This damn Rain definitely practiced before. He's nearly caught up to me. What? That impressive? Isn't it said that Rain's family is just a tenant farmer's family? Where would they get the money to learn basic swordsmanship? Exactly, and you see George, that boy. He and Rain are best buddies. Doesn't make sense that Rain would learn swordsmanship under poor conditions, but George, who is better off, didn't learn. The freckled boy beside them, glancing at George, who was still clumsily waving a wooden sword, pointed out a critical fact. In contrast, Rain's skilled swordsmanship was almost blinding. The group of pseudo-second-generation kids immediately fell into contemplation. Could it be that Rain is a swordsmanship prodigy? Absolutely impossible. They might be willing to admit that there are geniuses in the world, but that genius definitely could not be the son of a farmer like Rain. The swordsmanship instructor Humbert had also noticed Rain's changes and couldn't help being greatly surprised in his heart. Him who had been teaching child servants in the manor for many years, if Rain had indeed not learned basic swordsmanship before, then Rain's current level of swordsmanship might not be the highest, but it was definitely the fastest improving one. At first, when Rain executed those 3 basic moves, they were stiff and poor, clearly the work of a swordsmanship novice. But now, he seemed to have been practicing hard for 1 or 2 months and had become very adept. Could it be that Rain possessed an extremely high comprehension for swordsmanship, or was it a natural tacit understanding with the sword? Humbert decided to observe a bit longer. After all, some people like to be a little clever. This had happened before in previous child servant training sessions. Some child servants deliberately hid the fact that they had learned basic swordsmanship, initially making him very hopeful, but then their progress nearly came to a standstill. So the lie was quickly exposed. Because it's easy to tell the difference between someone who had learned earlier and someone who truly has talent as time goes on. Actually, Rain was already being quite restrained, intentionally slowing down the speed and accuracy of his ironwood sword's chopping. Otherwise, it would have been even more dazzling. While the child servants were undergoing basic swordsmanship training, sons of the low-level nobility and wealthy merchants had also come to the outer fort's central area to practice swordsmanship. Leading them was the noble girl with the chestnut-colored ponytail. As the youngest daughter of the Habsburg Earl, wherever Clea went, she was the center of attention. Clea glanced over and saw the child servants practicing their basic swordsmanship. She nodded to herself, not bad. The training of the manor's child servants was well implemented. Knight Lloyd was really dedicated. After casually glancing at the child servants, Clea immediately noticed that 2 or 3 of them stood out from the rest of the group with their swordsmanship. First was a freckled boy, who was seriously practicing the 3 styles of basic swordsmanship. Looking capable, he was one of the more remarkable among the child servants. Second was the tall boy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, who had the most refined basic swordsmanship of all the child servants. But it seemed to be set in stone, and he made no progress after several practices. This was most likely someone who had practiced basic swordsmanship beforehand. He could be skipped over. The last one was a black-haired, skinny boy who stood at the very edge of the group, currently practicing while dripping with sweat. Even though his posture seemed far from standard to Clea, and even the continuity of his force application had some issues, one could tell he was working hard. What particularly caught Clea's eye was that she noticed, after several repetitions, his movements visibly became a bit more standard. This rate of improvement seemed like a promising seedling. Clea tilted her head slightly and beckoned to Shadia, the chief maid standing beside her, and asked, "Shadia, who is that, the black-haired boy on the far right?" "That is Rain, a farmer's child. His parents are tenants of the manor." "And the freckled boy? That's Leonard, the son of the beach hotel owner in Flashgold Town." Clea nodded, not saying anything further. At that moment, a nobleman who was paying attention to Clea couldn't help but speak out. "Lady Clea, they're just a bunch of lowly commoners, not worthy of your noble concern." "Dennis, these are all subjects of the Habsburg family, not the lowborn you speak of." Clea glanced unhappily at the nobleman, retorting. She had heard that in the new continent, the commoners of the Eagle Federation were starting to run for parliament, yet many nobles in the ancient empire still believed their nobility was inborn, and that commoners were naturally inferior and ugly. This kind of bad habit made Clea feel very helpless. After being rebuked by Clea, the noble youth named Dennis clearly had a hint of anger on his face, but he did not dare to make a scene, only enduring in silence. Meanwhile, a young man dressed in silk clothes behind Dennis looked at Clea, then at Dennis, seemingly thinking of something amusing, his mouth curving slightly into a smile. Rain gradually demonstrated swordsmanship skills at a LV2 standard. The observing swordsmanship instructor Humbert was mostly convinced that Rain possessed an extremely high understanding of swordsmanship. Frankly speaking, Rain was a swordsmanship prodigy, but only a common 1 in 100. This made Humbert look at Rain in a new light. proper training, he had the makings of a guard or even a captain of the guard. Today, we will begin sparring with swords. In swordsmanship, if you want to improve quickly, you need a sparring partner. And the sparring partner should not be chosen at random. The best is someone of equal strength. Only then can your swordsmanship improve the most. Humbert's ringing voice echoed across the training field. Rain, Richard. The two of you come up and demonstrate the sparring. The rest of you watch closely. Humbert called out. The man with thick eyebrows was none other than Richard. Yes, instructor, the two men said in unison. After speaking, they quickly stepped out from the ranks and positioned themselves in front of the troop. Assuming the initial stance of basic swordsmanship, with the tips of their ironwood swords pointing at each other, Thick Eyebrow felt an indescribable anxiety and irritation about Rain's recent changes. Previously, when Rain stood out while fixing donkey hooves or nailing horseshoes, he did not care at all. Because his goal was to become a manor guard, and it was clear from his studying basic swordsmanship with his relatives in advance for the past 2 years. But what he did not expect was that during the swordsmanship training, Rain once again attracted the attention of the swordsmanship instructor Humbert. This he found difficult to accept. If this continued, this kid Rain would sooner or later become his formidable rival. Moreover, Rain had fought with him before, and he had come off worse. So Thick Eyebrow had been thinking all along whether he should, accidentally, hurt Rain during the sparring, maybe even to the point where Rain would be unable to hold a sword. Right after Humbert's command, Rain and Thick Eyebrow both thrust their swords at the same time. Rain immediately noticed that Thick Eyebrow's sword was slightly faster. This was due to the other's taller stature, longer reach, and more practiced basic swordsmanship giving him an advantage. Instantly, Rain quickly changed his move and used the strong sword body to block the opponent's thrust. The ironwood swords clashed with a dull sound. Rain stepped back 3 paces, while Thick Eyebrow only stepped back 1, clearly showing he had the upper hand. Thick Eyebrow showed a look of triumph. No matter how prodigious you are, kid, it'll be at least half a year before you can surpass me. But Rain's expression remained calm, as he had anticipated this situation all along. Firstly, when it comes to height, Thick Eyebrow was nearly a head taller than him, which naturally meant he had a much longer reach. This is quite advantageous in a sword fight. Secondly, with nearly 2 years of studying basic swordsmanship, Thick Eyebrow's skills were not something Rain's current LV2 basic swordsmanship could compare with. Rain estimated that, converted into the system's display of swordsmanship levels, Thick Eyebrow's swordsmanship skill should have reached or be close to a LV3 standard. Rain continuously blocked Thick Eyebrow's multiple attacks, and it was fraught with danger. Although there was no threat to his life, the heavy strikes of the ironwood sword were enough to cause excruciating pain. If I don't increase my own swordsmanship level, I'm definitely going to lose this match. What is Instructor Humbert's purpose in having me spar with Thick Eyebrow this time? To motivate me to strive harder after a defeat, or to further stimulate my potential? Bang, bang, bang. The dull sounds of the ironwood swords clashing kept coming. Humbert, standing with his arms crossed, watched the two duel with an impassive face. Although he had already made up his mind that if nothing unexpected happened, Thick Eyebrow would win the bout. Then Rain, having undergone a minor setback, should be inspired to strive harder. Good steel needs to be hammered. At this moment, the tall Clea took the lead, accompanied by a group of nobles and rich merchants' sons, riding into the outer fort from outside, seemingly having just finished their horseback riding training. On their high vantage point, they clearly saw 2 servant boys sparring. The sweaty Rain also sensed the hostility from Thick Eyebrow, because several times the opponent had deliberately aimed at his vital points. Damn, holding a grudge, are we? No wonder this bastard has been so quiet these past few days, so he's been waiting for me here. Serious injury, to put me out of action for 1 or 2 months. Fuck, this is utterly intolerable. Rain's face showed a trace of fierceness. As Rain decisively used a skill point, in an instant, basic swordsmanship rose from LV2 to LV3. At the same time, fragments of training memories regarding basic swordsmanship also flooded into his mind. Meanwhile, the thick-browed man noticed that Rain had a moment of blankness. He inwardly thought, good opportunity. With that, a fierce look crossed his face as he stepped forward and chopped down at Rain's right shoulder. If this blow were to hit, lying down for 10 days to half a month would be considered mild, and moreover, it was very likely that he could not study swordsmanship for 1 or 2 months. Facing the thick-browed man's attack, in an instant, Rain felt the wooden sword in his hand, as if it was an extension of his own arm. That feeling was as though the longsword was an extension of his arm. In the blink of an eye, Rain once again blocked strongly with the sword horizontally. The two wooden swords struck each other, once again making a dull sound. But this time, Rain firmly caught it and did not retreat. The thick-browed man, using the recoil from the clash, smoothly spun around and executed a spinning downward chop, swiftly aiming for Rain's face and eyes. At this moment, the thick-browed man felt incredibly exhilarated. This move was him performing above his swordsman level. In his mind, there was no way Rain could block it. When the time came, all he had to do was pretend that it was an accidental injury and act the part. Heh, the nickname One-Eyed Rain doesn't sound too bad. The corner of the thick-browed man's mouth curled up with a tiny trace of smugness. This downward chop immediately made the onlooking boys exclaim in surprise. George watched Rain anxiously, unsure if his close friend could fend off this attack. Swordsmanship instructor Humbert was poised and ready to intervene and block the sword. A jolt of alarm shot through Rain's heart, and in an instant he put power into his waist, instinctively leaned back quickly, and, using the strong blade, once again shielded himself, blocking the thick-browed man's fierce strike. Then, using the strength of his abdominal muscles, he sprang up and counterattacked rapidly. The thick-browed man's wrist, holding the sword, was struck heavily by Rain, and the wooden sword dropped in response. The swift reversal of the situation left the surrounding youths dumbfounded. Suddenly, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. This sort of instinctive intuition with swordsmanship. Seems like I underestimated myself before. Humbert was both surprised and slightly excited at this point, and at a distance, Clea, daughter of Earl Habsburg, also had a glint of admiration in her beautiful eyes. I remember Shadia saying that this black-haired boy seems to be named Rain. His father is a tenant farmer of the manor. Very good, a clean family background maybe. I could try nurturing him. If he truly had talent, she wouldn't skimp on giving him a chance. Whether or not he could seize the opportunity, that remained to be seen in his performance. Rain wins. Swordsmanship instructor Humbert immediately announced loudly, with an approving expression. The thick-browed man, expressionless, watched Rain's retreating figure as he left the field, feelings of resentment rising in his heart. Go on and be smug, Rain. Just you wait, damn it. He had already thought of another way to deal with Rain. Originally, he had been too proud to stoop to such methods. But this brat Rain was improving too quickly, so quickly that it gave him a feeling of alarm and dread. His family had run a tavern for many years, and the thick-browed man knew many people from all walks of life. For instance, Drunk Jack, who was a great choice having been a mercenary, was no ordinary talent. Rain, stepping off the field, suddenly stiffened. Then he was overjoyed. The system notification read as follows. Your skill basic swordsmanship has improved. Experience plus 17, you have experienced a battle. Militia professional experience points plus 9. A short bout of sparring. And I actually gained 9 points of professional experience points. This is almost the result of 2 days' worth of training. It seems what instructor Humbert said was completely right. Constantly sparring with an opponent of similar level is the shortcut to rapidly improving. Swordsmanship. For a moment, Rain felt that the thick-browed man was not as repulsive as before. After that defeat, it's clear that even if he suggests sparring, the other party will definitely refuse. Rain glanced around at the young servants. The only one with strength close to his was Thick Eyebrows, so choose Freckles. As Rain was pondering, swordsmanship instructor Humbert shouted loudly, pair up yourselves and practice. Thick Eyebrows directly chose Freckles for the practice. This meant Rain could only practice with George. But basically, with one exertion of force, Rain could defeat George, which greatly reduced the effectiveness of Rain's practice. The scene was clearly seen by Humbert, who had always been paying attention to Rain. After thinking for a moment, the opportunity-seeking Humbert stepped forward and said, Rain, come here, let's spar a bit. The words of swordsmanship instructor Humbert took all the young servants by surprise, and the gaze with which Thick Eyebrows and the group of pretenders looked at Rain was filled with even more jealousy. Clearly, this also startled Rain. Although he had improved the basic swordsmanship to LV3, in terms of strength, he was definitely no match for Humbert. But upon further thought, Rain was overjoyed. Instructor Humbert was planning to feed him moves. Rain checked the militiaman's profession panel again. Basic swordsmanship LV3. 20 over 500 was still far from leveling up, but his current militiaman level was already militiaman LV1, 69 over 100. If he could practice with an expert, Rain was sure that he could soon raise his militiaman profession level to LV2. Yes, Instructor Humbert. Rain, don't be nervous, attack me, Humbert said, smiling encouragingly. Rain nodded, bowed slightly to Instructor Humbert, and then assumed the basic swordsmanship starting stance. The next second, Rain's right hand held the ironwood shortsword level with his chest, the tip pointing outward. His right foot took a step. He pushed off with the tip of his foot, propelling his whole body forward like an arrow shot from a bow toward Humbert. It was a standard striding thrust. Facing swordsmanship Instructor Humbert, Rain's strike was not held back but was made with full force. The dull sound of ironwood meeting echoed. Humbert parried Rain's thrust with a swing of his sword and quickly delivered a chopping blow, forcing Rain to retreat and block immediately. Upon clashing, Rain detected that Instructor Humbert controlled his strength to a very subtle degree. Almost every swing of the sword was nearly the same as Rain's limit in strength. Their exchange was extremely fast, and in just over 10 seconds, they had exchanged more than a dozen moves back and forth. After another clash, they quickly separated. Very good. Rain, take a rest. Humbert was very satisfied with Rain's performance just now. It was clear to all the young servants below that Instructor Humbert was feeding moves to Rain. This was akin to the special coaching given in the past. Only top students got this kind of treatment. Now, all the young servants looked at Rain with jealousy. This kid had talent not only in blacksmithing, but now in swordsmanship as well, which was really. Among them, Thick Eyebrows was burning with the most jealousy, his eyes turning red with anger. Damn it, Rain. If it weren't for this brat, now Instructor Humbert's focus would definitely be on me. The practice partner, too, would definitely be me. Meanwhile, Rain was catching his breath deeply, his forehead covered in fine beads of sweat. The short battle with swordsmanship Instructor Humbert had drained Rain of a lot of physical strength and spirit, because the pressure Humbert gave him was far greater than Thick Eyebrows. Having regained his breath, he once again checked the system notifications. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has gained improvement. Experience plus 21. You have experienced a battle. Militia profession experience points plus 12. Hiss. That's a lot of experience. That brief sparring session of less than half a minute was equivalent to nearly 3 days of hard training on my own. Of course, this was the result of Humbert deliberately suppressing his own strength and feeding the moves to me. Seeing that Rain seemed to have recovered, Humbert, with a smile on his face, leisurely walked up to him and said, Rain, your basic swordsmanship is now on par with a regular militiaman, but don't be complacent. Continue to train hard. Thank you for the compliment, Instructor. I will keep working hard, Rain promptly replied respectfully. Humbert smiled and nodded. He glanced at the sunset about to dip below the horizon. It was Saturday, and the servant boys could go home. So he turned to the servant boys and announced, Today's swordsmanship practice is over. You are dismissed. At once, the already exhausted servant boys couldn't help but cheer. Many of them flopped down on the ground to rest. Humbert then leisurely prepared to leave the outer castle courtyard. At that moment, he casually noticed Rain by his side staring intently at him, which made him curiously ask, Rain, what is it? Is there something you need? Humbert was quite fond of this young man with a natural talent for swordsmanship. His steadfast character, displayed during intense training, deeply reminded him of his own younger days. This, Humbert, may I have another bout with you? Rain asked with a hopeful expression. Such a great opportunity to earn experience points was not to be missed after all. Humbert, unaware of Rain's inner thoughts at that moment, thought Rain's youthful spirit of not wanting to lose was coming through. He smiled and looked Rain up and down before saying, Sure, but… Rain, are you sure you don't need to rest a bit first? As long as you want, I can keep practicing with you. Really, Instructor? The joy on Rain's face was evident. At this point, Rain was nearly at his physical limit, but the chance to have personal training with Humbert was too good to pass up, especially since dog trainer training was starting next week. Therefore, Rain hesitated no more and allocated the few attribute points he had reserved during his blacksmith apprenticeship upgrade directly to his strength. Suddenly, a warm flow surged from his heart and spread throughout his body. In an instant, all of Rain's fatigue vanished, boosting points for recovery powerful. After this increase, Rain's strength reached 6 points. roughly on par with the average adult male in this world. Profession, blacksmith apprentice LV3, 0/500, / militia LV1, 81/100. The sparring resumed. After 3 rounds of sparring, Humbert was sweating profusely, while Rain still had a hungry look in his eyes, gazing eagerly at him, which made Humbert's scalp tingle a bit. You know, Rain, sometimes overtraining isn't necessarily good. It's important to balance work and rest, Humbert gently cautioned. Instructor, I'm not tired, Rain firmly responded. Looking at his panel showing militia LV1, 99/100, Rain clearly didn't want to remain just 1 point short of leveling up. Just 1 point away from upgrading my militia profession level. Instructor, push it a bit, Rain shouted inwardly. After a moment of silence, Humbert softly said, Ahem, Rain, it's getting dark and well, I have some things to take care of at home. Faced with Humbert's subtle refusal, Rain felt helpless. He could only reluctantly watch as the back of his swordsmanship instructor, Humbert, quickly receded. Just as Rain fretted over that single experience, an attractive maid dressed in a gray uniform approached him and said, Rain, Chief Maid Shadia asks for your presence in the lower back garden. Rain, momentarily taken aback, hesitated briefly before nodding in acquiescence. All right, I'll be there momentarily. George, you go on ahead and let my parents know that I may be late for dinner, asking them not to wait for me. George, who had been waiting at the side, nodded. However, he was quite puzzled when had Rain gotten to know Chief Maid Shadia. After all, the chief maid is a senior servant, second only to the butler and the treasurer in the Habsburg manor. Soon, Rain followed the maid, passing through the towering back doors of the castle and stepping into its rear gardens for the first time. Rain, please come in. Chief Maid Shadia is inside, said the beautiful maid with a slight smile before she took her leave. Rain nodded slightly in thanks for the maid's guidance. At this moment, he already had some speculations in his heart. However, some things had to wait until the moment of revelation to be confirmed. When Rain entered the garden, he saw the lady standing by the flower beds, none other than the Chief Maid Shadia, likely in her 40s. Dressed in a refined black maid's uniform with a stern expression, she exuded an air of severity. But the protagonist in the back garden was not the chief maid. It was instead the noble young lady, wearing a fitted hunting outfit, who was not far from her, standing in the center of the garden. That moment, she was fully engrossed in swinging her dual-handed greatsword, seemingly in contemplation of some sort of swordsmanship. This was an incredibly pleasant surprise for Rain. He had not expected to catch the attention of such a distinguished individual. He always thought it would be quite an honor to attract the attention of combat instructor Humbert. Exaggerating a bit, having the attention of Habsburg Manor's butler and knight Lord Lloyd would even be better. But he never expected to capture the attention of a noble young lady. He had heard of her identity, the youngest daughter of the Earl, her status far above that of Lord Lloyd, the butler and knight of Habsburg Manor. Rain, there are swords over there. Pick one and attack me. Lady Creia stopped her movements, turned to Rain and instructed. Had Rain not anticipated such an event, his heart would surely be in turmoil at this moment. As you wish, Lady Creia. As Rain approached the rack of weapons, he realized that the swords were all sharpened steel longswords of various types: short swords, knightly longswords, bastard swords, and even dual-handed greatswords, all seeming to be of exceptional quality. After some thought, Rain chose a knight's longsword that was about the same length as the training ironwood sword he was familiar with, and stood ready in the center of the garden. This was his first time in either his past or present life holding such a sharp weapon, about to engage in a battle with someone. He couldn't help but feel tense inside. If you're ready, then let's begin, Creia said with a slight smile. A dual-handed greatsword now exchanged for a bastard sword. Creia immediately delivered a downward slash at Rain, who instinctively blocked with his sword horizontally. Clang, the sound of metal striking metal rang out. But this was just the beginning. Creia followed up with a rapid 3-strike combination. Suddenly, Rain's pupils shrank and he swiftly retreated. Even though he kept retreating, he was barely able to defend, with no chance to counterattack. 3 seconds later, Creia's sword stopped at Rain's neck. He lasted only 3 seconds. In this sparring session with Creia, Rain resisted for merely 3 seconds before he was swiftly defeated. This was in spite of the fact that Creia had deliberately held back, controlling her physical abilities to match Rain's level. Rain sensed this too, especially since he had seen her swinging around a 70 or 80-pound dual-handed Greatsword as if it were a mere stick. Yet this 3-second skirmish brought rain. Your skill in basic swordsmanship has improved, experience points plus 15 having engaged in combat. Your militia profession experience points plus 4 congratulations. Your militia profession level has increased. Remaining attribute points, 1 remaining skill points. 1. You've learned the basic swordsmanship quite well, it's quite rare among young servants. You do have a certain talent for swordsmanship. But it's not top-notch, the girl said, looking up at Rain. Unfortunately, your physical condition is a bit lacking. The hope of becoming a formal knight isn't very great. It seems I was hoping for too much. It's really difficult to find someone with knight potential among ordinary people, Clea said with a hint of disappointment. Wait a minute, who is she looking down on? At this moment, the look that the noble girl gave him made Rain realize why they say women are the driving force for a man's determination to become stronger. Wait a moment, Lady Clea, I want to try one more time. Can you give me another chance? Rain said, looking up at the girl with a burning gaze. Oh, can you handle it? The girl looked at Rain with a half-smile. That moment, Rain really wanted to shout to Clea that when a beauty asks a man if he can handle it, would any man give a second type of answer? Without hesitation, Rain immediately added the attribute points he had just gained from leveling up to militia LV2 into agility. In the martial world, only speed is unbreakable. It was precisely because Clea's sword was so fast that he had been unable to react in time. When his agility went from 6 to 7 points, a warm surge pumped from his heart, quickly spreading through his body, and suddenly Rain felt a renewed sense of strength throughout his body. That's the best part about adding points, it always fully restores your stamina. The girl was about to refuse, but seeing the determined look in Rain's eyes as he got up again, she nodded and said, "Okay, but this is your last chance." Rain gave a slight bow, and the next second, the speed at which Rain stepped forward had increased by at least 20%, which slightly startled Clea. With his stamina fully recovered, and his agility increased by 1 point, as well as his familiarity with the steel sword from the previous fight. Due to several contributing factors, his combat ability was now a whole level higher than before. This level of strength. The more the girl fought, the more surprised she became. Ding ding clang clang. The two engaged in rapid combat. The chief maid Shadia, watching from the side, also had a change in the way she looked at Rain, shifting from calm to surprised. After a sudden thrust of her sword, the girl repelled Rain and said, "Not bad, Rain, you can go back now." Now Rain was a bit confused, did she acknowledge him or not? He had deliberately kept some skill points in reserve in case Lady Clea was not satisfied, so he could. But given her current stance, all Rain could do was give a slight bow and say, "Goodbye, Lady Clea." Then, Rain turned and left. The girl watched Rain's departing figure intently. She had been ready to give up, but Rain had suddenly given her a pleasant surprise. From his expression, it seemed that even the strength he had just displayed wasn't his limit. It appeared he still had something in reserve. If that's the case, then he might indeed be a knight prospect worth cultivating. However, there's no rush. She needed to investigate his background first. At this moment, Shadia, pondering, asked with a hint of confusion, "Miss, why do you value this Rain so much?" Although Rain seems to have decent talent, both young Master Dennis and young Master Marcos are already level 3 knight attendants. They are much stronger than Rain, who is about the same age. In the chief maid's eyes, Rain might have good talent, but starting knight training now was just too late. She didn't think Rain had any chance of catching up with Dennis and Marcos. Yet if Rain's future was just to become an ordinary guard, then he wouldn't be worth the trouble the mistress was taking. Shadia, Rain is fundamentally different from them. Dennis is the son of Baron Norman and has been practicing the family's inherited night breathing method from a young age. His current strength is proof of mediocre talent at best, Clea said slowly. And Marcos is the son of the president of the Bordeaux Merchants Guild. He has been taking all sorts of potions to enhance his attributes since he was a child. It may seem like he's making fast progress, but he has already exhausted his potential, and the possibility of becoming a formal knight is very low, Clea explained. Shadia's eyes widened. It was the first time she had heard her mistress talk about this. "So you mean to say Rain has high potential?" The girl did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned around, bent down, and gently stroked a pure white horseshoe orchid in the back garden, creating a beautiful curve. "Shadia, do you know what conditions a person needs to meet to become a transcendent?" The chief maid furrowed her brow, deep in thought over the question. Though she was literate and often read books, they were mostly about noble etiquette, introductions to noble emblems, or the daily management of estates. The scope of this question frankly exceeded her knowledge. After a good while the chief maid, frowning delicately and with some hesitation, replied, "Talent." The girl let out a gentle smile. "You've got one right. To become a transcendent, one must have 4 conditions simultaneously: determination, talent, perseverance, and opportunity. I had seen determination and perseverance in Rain, which is why I asked you to call him to the back garden. Just now I confirmed that he indeed possesses considerable talent." Upon hearing this, the chief maid said with sudden realization, "I see, but... Miss, you just mentioned 3 qualities that Rain possesses, but didn't you say one needs 4? Shadia, are you talking about opportunity? I am his opportunity," the girl declared, her face blooming into a radiant smile. Inside the Flashgold Town Inn, bushy brows were deep in conversation with a burly adult male in a secluded corner. "Drunkard Jack, here are 10 silver coins. Just break that kid Rain's sword hand and it'll be enough," Richard said sourly to the adult male beside him. "Skillful, even with a talent. If his hand is broken, I'd like to see how the boy will learn swordsmanship. Just 10 silver coins, that's not enough to buy me 2 days' worth of drink." The man known as Drunkard Jack was still somewhat sturdy in appearance, having once been a mercenary. Though he now spent his years frequenting taverns or mingling with streetwalkers, his strength was no longer what it once was. "Richard, make it at least 15 silver coins, and I'll take care of that kid for you." Drunkard Jack gestured for more money, greed shining in his eyes. "Fine, 15 it is. But you have to make sure this doesn't get out." Richard gritted his teeth and agreed to the price increase. After all, with the money he had on hand, he couldn't afford to hire a real expert. He could only rely on people like Drunkard Jack. But to deal with Rain, that would suffice, right? Today he should be heading home to stay the night, and tomorrow evening he will return to the manor. So, Drunkard Jack, if you're going to act, seize the opportunity and make your move quickly. Burp, no worries, Drunkard Jack belched, patting his chest in assurance. "Just a little brat." Before leaving, Richard gave it some thought and reminded Drunkard Jack that kids got some talent for swordsmanship. Don't capsize in the gutter. "PFFT. Don't forget, I used to be a mercenary." "A mercenary?" Drunkard Jack muttered, scoffing at Richard's caution. After Richard left, Drunkard Jack planned to have a couple more drinks, but as he lifted his head, he inadvertently caught sight of a familiar figure walking past the front of the tavern. "Hey, isn't that the kid, Rain?" Drunkard Jack was overjoyed at once. Tusk. Easy money." Immediately, Drunkard Jack stood up and began to follow him. At dusk, as the sun set in the west, Rain hurried home, pondering what move Lady Kreia would make next. Would she recruit him directly, or would she say? Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of footsteps from behind. The wind whistled behind his head. The effects of his agility raised to 7 points were now fully displayed. Rain abruptly darted forward, causing the attacker's planned blow to the back of his head to miss entirely. But Rain hadn't completely evaded injury. The strike still landed heavily on his back. A severe pain shot through his back, but it was much better than being hit in the back of the head. At the same time, the attacker behind Rain had not expected his seemingly guaranteed strike to miss, and the person froze in surprise. Seizing the moment of the attacker's hesitation, Rain quickly turned around and grabbed the stick used to attack him, pulling it with force. The attacker, of course, was not about to let go and immediately gripped the stick tightly, but in his haste, he still staggered from Rain's pull. With this pull, the attacker's mind momentarily relaxed. Indeed, his opponent was just a youngster, whose strength was far from matching his own, even with the element of surprise. The young foe couldn't seize the stick from his hands, which was quite weak. As he was thinking this, Rain delivered an extremely swift uppercut kick, striking hard at the center of his adversary's groin. The attacker's face went ashen as a pig's liver, releasing the stick in agony, clutching his groin with both hands and immediately squatting down. Rain, holding the stick, aimed it at the attacker's temple and struck down hard. Without even a grunt, the attacker crumpled to the ground. Only then did Rain start to breathe heavily. Although the struggle had lasted less than 10 seconds, it was his first time being attacked in this world. Luckily, he had made significant progress in all his physical attributes and swordsmanship lately. Otherwise, he might not have been able to react to the attacker's first blow in time. He could have been taken down with just one strike of the cudgel. Rain quickly looked up and scanned the surroundings. At this time, most of the residents of Flashgold Town had already gone home for dinner. and there were few people on the nearby streets. Rain's home was at the end of the town's main thoroughfare, an isolated location, which meant even fewer passers-by. This meant that almost no one had noticed what had happened here. After a moment's thought, Rain expended some effort to drag the attacker into the nearby woods and found a vine about as thick as a thumb to tie the person in loops around a large tree. It was then that Rain ripped off the black scarf the attacker had used as a disguise. "Hey, isn't this drunkard Jack, who loiters in the tavern all the time?" Flashgold Town was not a big place, and Rain immediately recognized the person's identity. After a bit of contemplation, Rain thought of several suspects who might have been behind this deed: bushy eyebrows, freckles, or was it the other two scions? Clearly, bushy eyebrows was the most likely. After thinking it over, Rain woke drunkard Jack up. "Rain, you little brat, untie me right now." Rain swiftly pulled off drunkard Jack's smelly socks and stuffed them into the fellow's mouth. Although the dense forest had good sound insulation, to be on the safe side, Rain quickly covered his mouth. A month's worth of stench from unwashed socks, once pressed into Jack's mouth, even made him tear up and drip mucus. Rain, disgusted, rubbed the hand that had touched the opponent's smelly socks on the ground. "I ask, you answer. If you understand, nod your head." Rain crouched down and stared at Jack, who was tied up like a rice dumpling. Apparently the stench was unbearable, and Jack nodded his head frantically. Rain took the dirty socks out of the mouth of drunkard Jack and said, "Who told you to attack me?" Drunkard Jack gasped for air and said, "Rain, you'd better let me go right now or else." Once again Jack's mouth was gagged with the smelly sock. Rain looked at drunkard Jack fiercely and said, "Drunkard Jack, it seems you haven't grasped the situation. We're in the forest, and if I let a little blood, it won't be long before wild animals are attracted. You don't have relatives in Flashgold Town. Nobody cares about you there, so when people notice your disappearance, it's likely half a month will have passed." At first, drunkard Jack's eyes held a strong sense of disdain. You, a mere brat, have the audacity to kill someone. He simply didn't believe it. But when Rain laid out a very feasible plan, word by word, his eyes slowly filled with horror, and Rain immediately caught the flash of terror that passed through the other's eyes. This was nothing but a hollow, tough guy. So Rain continued to threaten with an emotionless face, and at that time, what would you have left? Probably not even your bones. "But no one will suspect me, because I'm just a child." At this point, drunkard Jack's expression seemed to start yielding. "Oh, to hell, still a child? Is there such a ruthless child? Richard only wanted me to break your hand, but damn it, you're directly after my life." Drunkard Jack had always been a coward. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stopped being a mercenary after doing it for some time, because he felt that the blood-spattered life of a mercenary really didn't suit him. This time, as soon as Rain removed the stinky sock from his mouth, drunkard Jack immediately shouted, "It was the tavern keeper's kid, Richard. He gave me some money to break your hand." Upon hearing this, Rain knew it was that bushy-browed guy. Rain hadn't ruled out the possibility that drunkard Jack was lying, but it's very hard to lie when one is scared. Of course, the most important thing was that the bushy-browed guy had the motive to do this. His natural talent in swordsmanship seemed to really irk Bushy Brows. Recalling the look in Bushy Brows' eyes when he was defeated in the day's sparring, Rain quickly connected the two events. Meanwhile, in the dense forest nearby, a silent spectator had appeared. Just now, Hamilton had heard an unusual noise from the woods. As the newly appointed town sheriff of Flashgold Town, he was quite concerned about the local security, so he immediately slipped into the woods to investigate. What he saw surprised him. A slender youth had tied up a burly man and was interrogating him. With just a glance, Hamilton recognized the burly man tied to the tree. It was drunkard Jack, a man with a terrible reputation in Flashgold Town. This good-for-nothing often loitered around, committing petty theft, and boasted about his mercenary past to several widows every day. As a potential threat to local security, Hamilton had been watching him closely ever since he came to Flashgold Town. Quickly, he learned the whole story from drunkard Jack's interrogation. He hadn't expected that this daring youth was just a commoner's son and was currently undergoing servant training at the Habsburg Manor. An interesting little bugger. Following Hamilton's gaze, we turned back to Rain. Rain appeared deep in thought. But he hadn't really considered that Bushy Brows, with his thick eyebrows and big eyes, could be so devious. As for the man in front of him, Rain began to size up drunkard Jack. This made drunkard Jack think that Rain was really about to bleed him, and he couldn't help but cry out in terror, "Rain, stop. Let's talk this out nicely." Rain struck drunkard Jack hard on the head, prompting a miserable howl from him. "What number is this?" Drunkard Jack's eyes widened as he stared at the single finger that Rain was holding up. He quickly said, "It's 1-1, smack." Rain struck his head hard again with a stick. "What number is this?" Rain asked again calmly. Drunkard Jack's eyes bulged as he stared at the hand Rain held out. He wasn't seeing things, there was only one finger. "1, it's 1, stop hitting me." Immediately after, Rain struck Jack's forehead with his stick again. "How many is this?" Rain asked, gesturing with his fingers once more. By this time, drunkard Jack was not feeling good at all and wailed with a crying tone, "Whatever you say it is." Not knocked senseless yet, Rain muttered to himself. Although he spoke softly, Hamilton, not far away and with formidable strength, heard everything clearly, causing the corners of his mouth to twitch involuntarily. The kid's ruthless enough to dumbfound someone. But soon, Hamilton understood something, and a slight smile formed on his lips. He guessed that this young man actually didn't want to kill drunkard Jack outright, which is why he aimed to beat him senseless, avoiding future trouble. However, having an additional murder case in my jurisdiction is not a good thing. So, Hamilton took a few steps forward, his leather boots making a sound as they stepped on dry twigs. Meanwhile, Rain had just noticed drunkard Jack's exposed money pouch, bulging as though it contained a fair amount of coins. This made Rain's eyes shine with anticipation. Just as he bent down to take the other's money pouch, his body suddenly froze. Then, he quickly stood up, turned, and gripping the stick tightly, looked towards the direction from where the noise was coming. Indistinctly, he saw a tall figure emerging from the dense forest, causing cold sweat to break out on Rain's back whoosh in an instant. Moreover, Rain could barely make out a longsword at the person's waist. This startled Rain, making the hairs on his body stand on end. "They have a weapon. I don't know if they are friend or foe. No, they must be an enemy. I don't recognize any mercenary. I can't risk my life on this. I must first flee into the forest to lose this person and ensure safety." In just a moment, a series of thoughts flashed through Rain's mind. Rain shot into the nearby dense forest like an agile monkey, disappearing in an instant. Hamilton was momentarily dumbfounded, but he immediately realized something and couldn't help but show a face that was both annoyed and amused. Suddenly, as the dirt beneath Hamilton's feet burst apart, his towering figure shot into the dense forest like an arrow released from a bow, moving nearly twice as fast as Rain. Rain, meanwhile, was darting left and right through the forest, trying to confuse his pursuer's line of sight, and after maintaining high-speed running for a while, he started to feel the strain on his stamina. He slowed down his pace to listen carefully, and after a while there seemed to be no movement behind him. So, Rain immediately hid behind a large tree, panting heavily. He thought to himself, who could that be? Suddenly, a stranger's voice came from beside Rain, "Not a bad speed." Rain, as if struck by lightning, was startled and thought, "He won't let me go. He actually chased me this far." This made Rain feel even more certain that the other person was an enemy, not a friend. Instantly, Rain's face showed determination, and he made a decision. He decided to add his last skill points to his basic swordsmanship. After all, what's the use of points if you've lost your life? In an instant, Rain's basic swordsmanship skill level 3 had risen to level 4. In his mind, hundreds of training images flashed by like a slideshow. Suddenly, Rain exploded with a fierce energy, wielding the stick he had just picked up, and performed a striding thrust directly at the opponent's face. "Since I can't escape, I might as well fight for a chance to survive." This extraordinary and swift strike surprised Hamilton, and his appreciation for Rain increased a notch. Such temperament, speed, and swordsmanship in a common young boy was indeed a rare gift. However, against Rain's full-powered blow, Hamilton merely extended his right hand, and very ordinarily gripped and securely fixed the swiftly attacking stick in front of him. No matter how hard Rain tried, he couldn't move the stick at all, which suddenly made his heart sink to the bottom. "It's over. The difference in strength is just too great." It was then that Hamilton slowly continued speaking. "Don't be nervous, young man. I'll handle that drunkard Jack for you. I'll make sure he spends a good while in the solitary cell, and afterward I won't let him trouble you again." "Ah, solitary cell? Are you the newly appointed sheriff?" Rain was stunned at first, but then immediately realized and blurted out. Immediately after, Rain carefully sized up the other man. The man was tall and imposing, Wearing a male noble's hunting outfit that fit perfectly, with a longsword at his waist, he indeed looked more like a noble than a bandit or a bounty hunter. This slightly eased Rain's mind. Clever young man. I am indeed the new sheriff of Flashgold Town, Hamilton. Seeing the astonishment on Rain's face, Hamilton couldn't help but show a trace of a smile on his serious face. It wasn't that he wanted to scare Rain, but Rain's quick reactions was somewhat unexpected, leaving him no chance to speak. Sir, I'm really sorry, I didn't know you were. Rain clearly detected the goodwill in the other man's words. There's nothing wrong with what you did to that drunkard Jack. After all, he attacked you first, and you were merely defending yourself. You just swung a weapon at an imperial baron and the sheriff of Flashgold Town. What do you think I should do to punish you? Hamilton said, slightly teasing. This. Rain was dumbfounded. The sheriff before him had changed his tone so suddenly. However, considering your youth, I can forgive you this time, but you need to do something for me. Hamilton seemed not to want to stress Rain further and quickly changed his tone again. What is it? I won't do anything illegal or disorderly. Rain immediately became alert and shot a glance at Hamilton. Realizing that he had been waiting for him, Hamilton was left speechless. Illegal or disorderly? As the sheriff of town in the Empire, would I ask a child to do something illegal or disorderly? However, after thinking it over, he decided to reveal a bit of information to Rain, saying, I can't tell you the details right now, but you should know about the child disappearances that have been happening from time to time. I'm closely monitoring this issue. Upon hearing this, Rain sighed in relief. So it was about that. Even in his past life, he had a deep disdain for human traffickers. Now, since Sheriff Hamilton had caught him in a bind, if it was just about him cooperating on the child disappearance cases, he could agree to that. Actually, even if he didn't want to agree, the situation compelled him to. Although all sheriffs nowadays have such a sense of responsibility. Suddenly, Rain didn't dislike the man in front of him so much. In terms of strength, I'm barely stronger than an ordinary militiaman. What could I possibly help him with? Rain immediately realized that something might be amiss here. Should he just refuse outright? They've got something on me. Forget it, just play along for now and agree first. It looks like I need to enhance my strength after all. Okay, however. Sir, my abilities are limited. I'm still a child and I can't help much. Rain spread his hands, his expression showing no fear of boiling water. This couldn't help but make Hamilton laugh. In his heart, he thought, still a child. With your disposition, swordsmanship, and speed, I'm afraid most of the militia aren't a match for you. Don't worry, it won't exceed your capabilities, Hamilton said, smiling and shaking his head. Then, respected sheriff, sir, may I go home now? As soon as Hamilton finished speaking, Rain ran off like a startled rabbit, without looking back. This made Hamilton shake his head helplessly again. Such a shrewd little guy. However, handling this case indeed requires someone like Rain. It might just have surprising effects. Rain ran all the way to near his house before he slowed down, his chest heaving greatly. At this moment, his mood was both excited and scared, along with a bit of regret and disappointment. Everything about tonight's incident was under control. But unfortunately, I ran into the new sheriff Hamilton. His strength is too great. Rain thought about it. Skill-wise, Humbert, the servant swordsman, probably isn't his opponent. It seems only the noble young men's instructor, Lord Perez, could possibly fight him. Luckily, he doesn't seem to be a particularly harsh person. Otherwise, I might have been in trouble. Also, what exactly does he want me to help with? But, thinking about how even after continuously boosting my agility and militiaman swordsmanship, I'm still no match for Hamilton, not even forcing out his true strength, it's indeed a bit disheartening. The gap in strength is just too great. I still need to think of a way to enhance my strength quickly, however. Today's events, which were almost like actual combat, greatly benefited Rain. He focused his attention on the system, and the notification was as follows. You have undergone a battle. Militiaman professional experience points plus 23. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has been enhanced. Experience points plus 11. You have undergone a battle. Militiaman professional experience points plus 8. The only thing that Rain slightly regretted was that he didn't manage to grab drunkard Jack's waist pouch. Otherwise, the money inside would have been enough to buy some treats to reward himself and his family. Feeling a tad disappointed, Rain quickly returned home. Brother, you're back. He immediately gave Rain a big hug as soon as he arrived. Soon after, the family of 4 sat down at the simple dining table and started dinner. Instantly dispelled the disappointment in Rain's heart. I'll definitely find a way to earn it. Early the next morning, declining his best friend George's suggestion to go to the forest to pick nuts again, Rain arrived at the blacksmith shop. Upon entering the blacksmith shop, he was immediately greeted by a wave of intense heat. The apprentices were all busy with their own tasks, while the blacksmith Boris Patton was forging an iron sword, which instantly caught Rain's eye. Just as he was about to move closer to get a better look, Drews, who was working the bellows, eagerly waved at Rain. "Rain, you're here." Hearing this memorable name, the blacksmith apprentices, who had been concentrating on their work, were all startled. Suddenly, a few of the burly apprentices exchanged glances, seeing a sense of urgency in each other's eyes. The expression on their faces seemed to convey, "Why is this kid here again? And this time, he's not even coming in the afternoon but bright and early in the morning, bad luck." The blacksmith Boris, who rarely took the initiative to greet anyone, called out, "Rain, you're here." "Yes, Uncle Boris." "Oh, you're making a longsword today." Rain pretended to have just noticed and took 2 steps forward, planning to observe Boris's forging technique. The glowing hot sword embryo was clearly longer than the average one-handed sword. "That's right, today I'm making a bastard sword for a friend," Boris said succinctly. Rain suddenly understood. He knew what a bastard sword was, a type of sword that fell between one-handed swords and two-handed swords. It had advantages in length and offensive power over a one-handed sword, and was more convenient to carry than a two-handed sword. Nobility, bounty hunters, or mercenaries often used it, and it required some time to train in order to use it with agility. "By the way, Rain, last time you got familiar with working the bellows, so continue to help Drews with the bellows today." Boris didn't let Rain sit idle and quickly gave him a task. "Okay, Uncle Boris." Although it was just working the bellows again, Rain agreed promptly. Rain also wanted to learn other things like casting, forging nails, pots, and such, but trust between people takes time to build. If Rain had money now, he certainly could speed up this relationship, and maybe even get Boris the miser to start teaching him to forge some kind of ironware today. But alas, he was poor. Thinking of this, Rain felt a strong sense of annoyance toward Hamilton, the newly appointed sheriff. Rain walked over to the bellows and Drews, with a joyous expression, quickly stepped aside. "Rain, we're already skillful at working the bellows last time, so I leave this to you." After speaking, Drews moved as agilely as a monkey, quickly joining Boris at his side, with an eager-to-learn expression, watching the creation of the bastard sword. Rain smiled to himself, betting that it wouldn't be long before Drews would be assigned to other tasks by Boris. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, Boris sent Drews off to smelt iron ingots. Rain couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Boris Patton was notoriously stingy with his craft in Flashgold Town. Without cold, hard cash, he definitely wouldn't teach you anything substantial in a short time. Unless you spent enough time in the blacksmith shop. No longer distracted by watching others, Rain began to focus on the task of working the bellows. You have performed the bellows work, and your comprehension has increased. Your skill in working the bellows has improved. Experience +3. You focused on the blower blacksmith apprentice professional experience points, +1 aside from going home at noon to have lunch with his family. Rain spent the entire Sunday at the blacksmith shop. Of course, the results were gratifying. Rain flipped to the second page of the framework, the Blacksmith Apprentice Professional Panel. Blacksmith Apprentice LV3 was more than halfway completed, meaning that if everything went well, he would be able to advance to LV4 by next Sunday. Blacksmith Apprentice LV3, 265 over 500. Stoking Blower LV3, 395 over 500. Hoof Trimming LV2, 295 over 300. Nailing Horseshoes LV1, 56 over 100. As dusk approached, an exhausted Rain stepped out of the blacksmith's shop, ready to return to the Habsburg Manor. At the same time, not far from Rain, something sinister was happening in a secluded alley. In a low house, a skinny boy was about to go out to buy some stuff when suddenly, his mouth was covered with a piece of rag. Immediately, the skinny boy began to struggle. "Damn it, kid, behave," a deep male voice exclaimed. The next second, a sharp dagger, gleaming with a cold light, appeared in front of the boy. Instantly, the little boy dared not struggle any longer. A piece of hemp rope quickly bounded the little boy tightly, and a piece of coarse cloth was stuffed into his mouth before a pair of strong hands put him into a large black bag. Soon after, two burly figures carrying black bags disappeared quickly into the alley. "Boss, what does the higher-up want with so many kids? Including this one, we've already nabbed the 11th child. I heard the other brothers are snatching kids too. Could it be that the nobles' demand for boys and girls has spiked recently, Bud? Could the nobles really fancy these skinny, odd-smelling street urchins or poor kids?" Scarface seemed puzzled, turning his head in doubt to ask his companion with the scruffy beard. "Scarface, is this something you need to worry about? The higher-ups have made their request. As long as the money is right, we just do our job. Why bother asking so many questions?" The scruffy bearded man retorted irritably. However, after some thought, he seemed to agree there was some sense in Scarface's words and added, "It's probably not the demand of the nobles in the county town. I heard this might be the request of the Wilderness Brotherhood. But you'd better not inquire too much about these matters in front of others, or I'm afraid you won't know how you died." Yes, you're right, boss. By the way, boss, we've nearly combed through the northern part of Flashgold Town. In a few days I'll check out the south side. Be careful. The new Sheriff Hamilton seems to be paying close attention to this matter. It's going to be troublesome if he gets wind of it," warned the man with the scruffy beard. "Don't worry, boss. I push a snack cart along the streets. I can spot suitable targets with one glance," Scarface assured while tapping his chest. "Hey, boss, when we get this batch of money, where shall we go to have some fun first? The quality at Flashgold Town's brothels is too low. Shouldn't we go back to the county town to play for a few days and lay low at the same time?" Scarface seemed to think of something delightful, his face showing a sleazy look. "Damn it, Scarface, you'll end up dead on a woman's belly someday. But you also make a point. After we get the money, we'll make a trip back to the county town." The scruffy bearded man consented after some thought. "Wearing this skin mask is so uncomfortable. It's too tight. Boss, can you make me a new one?" the burly man known as Scarface complained. Rain thought he heard some noise from the nearby alley, but after stopping to listen for a while, he shook his head and continued on his way to Habsburg Manor. What he didn't know was that he had just passed by an evil deed. Next morning, the child servants began their dog training apprentice course under the guidance of an old man with a goat beard, accompanied by a sighthound much like the ones from his past life. Rain recognized the breed. Long-limbed, with a body shaped like a bow, both speed and explosive power were truly astonishing. Even their heads seemed designed to reduce wind resistance, longer and more narrow than a usual dog's head, but with strong jaw muscles and a formidable biting force, making them exceptional noble hunting dogs. However, with droopy eyelids, the old man showed little interest in teaching the child servants, evidently just going through the motions. "In some time, each of you will receive a 3-month-old sighthound. During the assessment, if you can command the sighthound to squat, attack, stop, and retrieve, you will be considered to have passed the test," he said. For the rest of the time, the old man had no wish to speak more than necessary with the child servants, instead directing them to the dog kennels on the west side of the outer fort to pick out a puppy, and after that, simply let them play with their dogs. Although the child servants were all confused, they were still very happy to have a small dog to play with. In the meantime, Rain paid close attention to the expression of the boy with thick eyebrows. As expected, this guy had something to hide. While playing with the puppies, he often got distracted, frequently casting sidelong glances at Rain. In his eyes was confusion, as if puzzled by something that should have happened but did not. Rain chuckled silently. "The damned thick eyebrows, it's definitely you, bastard." Just as Rain confirmed that the employer was the boy. Thick eyebrows, the latter quickly concocted an excuse for the drunkard Jack, which was that Jack hadn't found the chance to make a move on Rain the day before. Damn it, that good-for-nothing drunkard Jack. Always dragging his feet when it's time to get things done. Looks like I must urge him again this Sunday and make him take his shot as soon as possible, he murmured. Since Rain was now certain it was the boy with thick eyebrows, he relaxed and started playing with the puppy. But as fun as playing with dogs is, having played with them all day long, Rain's strength had made almost no advancement. Moreover, the new job panel that Rain had been looking forward to, such as the dog trainer, had not been activated. This left Rain quite puzzled. Could it be that there was no such profession as a dog trainer? That shouldn't be the case. The evening after the dog training session ended, a beautiful maid dressed in a gray uniform came to find Rain and said, "Rain, the chief maid Shadia has asked to see you. Please come with me. The timing of the maid's appearance was not like last time, on a Saturday evening when nearly all the child's servants had left. So just as the pretty maid led Rain away, the rest of the child's servants exploded in chatter. Fug, how has Rain gotten in good with Chief Maid Shadia? The thick-eyebrowed boy said, his face darkening. Yeah, my family hasn't even managed to establish a connection with Chief Maid Shadia. And Rain's family is just a tenant farmer. He can't possibly have that kind of network. That's absolutely impossible. Freckles pondered for a moment and then shook his head. However, that scene had just intensified the thick-eyebrowed boy's sense of urgency. Rain's talent in swordsmanship was becoming more and more outstanding, and now he seemed to have built a connection with the chief maid, making it likely that the position of a bodyguard was well within his reach. On the other side, Rain followed the beautiful maid as they made several turns, eventually reaching the castle's back garden, which they merely passed through this time before continuing on. The maid led Rain into a room on the first floor of the castle. The maid knocked on the door respectfully and said, "Chief Maid Shadia, Rain is here." "Come in," came the response. The 40-year-old Chief Maid Shadia opened the door, gestured for Rain to enter the room, and after closing the door, stood respectfully to one side. After entering, Rain first detected a strange fragrance, not the scent of women's perfume, but rather an aroma that could stir one's appetite. Then he quickly took in the room's features. The room seemed to be a spacious study, with a coffee table, several soft leather armchairs, and a simple mahogany desk, above which a candle on a mountain-shaped sconce was glowing warmly. But Rain also noticed another door at the back of the study, seemingly leading to another place. Lady Clea, the youngest daughter of the Earl, was diligently writing something on a parchment scroll with a goose feather quill. Rain, on the side table. "There's a piece of bear meat specially prepared for you." "Go eat it," Clea said without looking up. Rain was taken aback, while Chief Maid Shadia gave a subtle gesture towards the side table. Indeed, on the side table there was a covered silver dish. Rain approached and opened it to find a palm-sized piece of beast meat, emitting an aroma that whetted the appetite. It turned out to be the enticing smell he had noticed when he first walked in. A kind of delicious bear meat. This meat smells absolutely amazing. But isn't this portion a bit too small? Rain didn't even use the knife beside him. Only a fork to skewer the chunk of meat, and began to gobble it down. Delicious and quite chewy. In no time at all, Rain had devoured the so-called bear meat and still felt unsatisfied, exclaiming, "Tasty, just too little of it." At that moment, a slightly mocking smile appeared on the face of Chief Maid Shadia. Suddenly, Rain felt a warm current spreading rapidly from his stomach throughout his body. Soon, an extreme feeling of fullness emanated from his stomach, as if he had eaten 10 packs of those military compressed biscuits from his previous life. Instantly, Rain felt as though his stomach was about to burst, because there was absolutely no need for that. It was then that Lady Clea's voice, clear as a aureole, rang out, "Rain, do you feel a bit overstuffed? That was giant bear meat. It is rich in nutrients and energy. Given your constitution, eating that much is already your limit." "So that's it." Rain suddenly understood. No wonder he was only given a piece the size of a palm. Clea stood up and handed a scroll made of sheepskin to Rain. "Rain, have a look," she said. Upon receiving it, Rain opened the scroll to see 7 figures in different positions with giant bear breathing technique written alongside them. Since it was written in the common tongue, Rain could recognize it. The Empire did well in this aspect, as the spread of simple everyday written language among the populace was quite extensive. This is the breathing technique. Rain felt blissfully surprised. It was like being suddenly hit by a pie falling from the sky. Rain greedily began to read the contents of the breathing technique. The figures were simple line drawings, but they vividly captured the essence of each movement. Combined with the descriptions of the breathing rhythm, seemed to be a set of high-difficulty yoga positions similar to what Rain knew in his previous life. At the end, there was a long paragraph about how to use a secret medicine called Black Bomb in conjunction with the training that would greatly accelerate the progress of the giant bear breathing technique. Giant bear breathing technique. No wonder Lady Clea can wield a dual-handed greatsword that weighs 70 or 80 pounds as if it were a stick. Rain glanced at the imposing figure of Clea and had an epiphany. But Clea was no ordinary person, keen and transparent in her thoughts. At the mere age of 17, she had already stepped into the realm of a formal knight, capturing every move Rain made without missing a beat. Rain's glance just now. Clea's face turned slightly red, but she quickly recovered her composure and said, "Don't guess. The technique I practice is not the giant bear breathing technique. The giant bear breathing technique mainly develops one's constitution and strength. I think it's quite suitable for your current condition." God damn appropriate for my current condition. Rain was initially embarrassed by Clea's revealing of his thoughts, but once she finished her sentence, he quickly grasped her meaning. She's basically saying, I'm a weakling in a roundabout way. Rain, do you know why the maximum age for Paige is 14? Clea's voice rang out. This, Rain shook his head. Because 14 is arguably the latest age to start learning the breathing techniques. Any later, one would miss the body's rapid developmental phase, making it very difficult to train the breathing technique to a high level. The parchment I've given you contains a set of the giant bear breathing technique and instructions for using a secret potion, which can fully develop your physical constitution, enough to serve you until you're a third-level knight attendant. As for the advanced magic potion needed to be promoted to a formal knight. At this point, Clea paused, displaying a contemplative expression. You shouldn't be progressing that quickly. There is no need to worry about promotion now. Just focus on laying a solid foundation. Before long, I will leave Habsburg Manor. I've also left you some of the black tongue oil, and Shadia will arrange it for you. Suddenly, Clea changed the subject, her beautiful eyes looking at Rain as she asked, By the way, Rain, what is your purpose for participating in the page training this time? Under the gaze of Clea's clear eyes, Rain found himself unable to think of any lies and honestly said, I want to pass the assessment and become a guard of Habsburg Manor. Giggle, giggle, giggle. A melodious laugh like that of silver bells rang out. How about setting a more ambitious goal like becoming a true knight? If you can become a formal knight before you turn 18, I promise you can become one of my followers. If not, you can continue to be a guard. However, whether it's learning the giant bear breathing technique or my promise to you, you must keep it a secret even within Habsburg Manor. If this matter were known by others, it might not necessarily be a good thing for you. Rain felt a surge of excitement in his heart, mixed with some confusion. His mind was already racing. A knight, oh, this is about becoming a knight. Stepping into a position of power, isn't that much better than being a mere guard? Rain wished he could start practicing the giant bear breathing technique right now. But the secrecy, this feels so familiar. Secrecy even within Habsburg Manor. Could it be about an aristocratic struggle for inheritance? Training loyal subordinates from the bloodline? Or does Lady Crea aspire to the Earlship of Habsburg? Having been through a lot of TV dramas about the feuds and romances within wealthy families in his previous life, Rain could now think of many possibilities. However, for myself, the important thing is rapid development in the early stage. Once I've grown with a professional panel in hand, I needn't fear anyone. On the path to rise, it is inevitable to affect some people's interests. Later, I will also encroach on the established stakeholders' pie. Thus, encountering problems and challenges is unavoidable. Challenges directly smash them. Problems directly burst through. How could I not accept Lady Clea's assistance? If I were to give up such support because of some dangers, wouldn't that be incredibly cowardly? Rain could not help but remember a saying from his previous life. He who does not seize the blessings bestowed by the heavens will incur divine wrath. Of course, Lady Crea. Your recognition is a tremendous honor for me. Rain respectfully bowed. For a noble who could offer immense help and was also a beauty, Rain certainly wasn't stingy with sweet nothings. A sycophant deserves a poor death. A servant belongs to the service industry, which falls under the tertiary sector. To sum it up in one word, flattery. In other words, providing emotional value to one's master. Seeing Rain agree, Clea nodded in satisfaction and said, Rain, first, take some time to look over the giant bear breathing technique. Then I will guide you through the specific movement essentials. Yes, Lady Clea. Rain immediately focused his mind and began to earnestly read the 7 movements of the giant bear breathing technique. The 7 movements varied in posture, but at a rough glance, Rain found that the set progressed from easy to difficult. The first movement was the simplest, akin to the single-leg lunge from his previous life, arms raised horizontally, synchronized with breathing. Having just eaten the fierce bear meat and feeling overhated, Rain was eager to move and thus started performing the first movement on the spot. At first, Rain felt it was manageable, but in less than 5 minutes, his whole body began to heat up. Sweat beads formed on his forehead, and he started to sway, let alone breathing steadily. That would be ridiculous. Not panting was good enough. Rain knew he couldn't persist, so he immediately stopped, because according to the instructions, one had to maintain each movement for 30 minutes with steady breathing in order to learn the next one. Miss Clea, is there any trick to practicing this breathing technique? Rain rubbed his sore thighs and said, breathing technique, breathing is most important. You must always maintain steady breathing, feel the changes inside your body. Only then can it achieve the goal of strengthening the body, she replied. Rain, this is Kuroki oil. Apply it to the sides of your thighs and knees and your shoulders when practicing the first movement of the giant bear breathing technique. It can effectively enhance your perception of the body's changes. All right, I'll give it another try. Rain immediately took the small black bottle that Clea handed to him. Upon opening the bottle, a unique fragrance escaped, somewhat reminiscent of the musk and tiger bone balm from Rain's previous life. The liquid inside was yellowish-brown, like amber. Rain poured a little bit into his palm and followed Lady Clea's guidance on the side to warm it up before applying it to his knees and shoulders. Instantly, a burning warmth flowed into his skin from the areas where he rubbed it. When Rain attempted the first movement of the giant bear breathing technique again, he immediately felt different. As the burning warmth replaced the original muscle fatigue, he could feel every single muscle fiber in his thighs tensing up, which made him unconsciously focus his mind and consciously adjust his breathing to match the movements. You have practiced the giant bear breathing technique. Comprehension has improved. You have acquired a new skill, giant bear breathing technique. Your giant bear breathing technique skill has been enhanced. Experience +1 ding. Host triggered the core event for night attendant class. Change comprehension of giant bear breathing technique. Preconditions for advancement to night attendant are 1. Militia LV3 or above. 2. Strength 8 points or above, agility 8 points or above, constitution 8 points or above. 3. Any rider skill LV1 or above, shield defense LV1 or above, any archery skill LV2 or above, any swordsmanship skill LV3 or above. Current conditions do not meet the requirements. Advancement to night attendant failed. Surprise system prompt suddenly popped up, and Rain read over it several times, feeling both shocked and pleased. What shocked him was that the conditions for advancing to night attendant were rather extensive. Relatively speaking, he could possibly meet the first and second conditions after some time. However, among the intricate sub-items of the third condition, besides any swordsmanship skill LV3, which he met, he would have a hard time meeting the other parts in the short term. What pleased him was that now Rain knew what he was lacking and where to start in order to improve. Triggering an event to gain advancement information. Rain pondered silently. The triggering event that had just taken place gave Rain a deeper understanding of his golden finger. Rain glanced at it, and this time the giant bear breathing technique LV1, 1/100, was displayed on the militia panel, which was probably because there was no other more suitable profession panel available. Obviously, it would have been even less suitable to show the breathing technique in the blacksmith apprentice's profession panel. As Rain pondered the conditions for advancement, this time he managed to maintain the first posture of the giant bear breathing technique for an entire 15 minutes, which was undoubtedly a huge improvement compared to the previous 5 minutes. This made Clea, who was observing Rain from the side, smile and nod, saying, "Very good, Rain. Once you can maintain the first move for over half an hour, you can then try the second move." Although Rain's constitution was a bit weak, his comprehension was excellent and he learned quickly. In fact, Rain's ability to sustain it for so long this time was not without the aid of a wandering mind technique. Meanwhile, the chief mage Shadia was looking at Rain with a face full of amazement. With such a rate of improvement, no wonder Lady Clea holds Rain in a different regard. It seems that when it comes to recognizing people, the young lady's vision is indeed much stronger than mine. Congratulations, your constitution attribute has increased. Rain was startled and immediately focused his attention on the panel, where he noticed his constitution had unexpectedly changed from 5 points to 6 points. He remembered clearly that he hadn't spent any points just now. Neither of his two professions, blacksmith apprentice and militia, had gained a level, so why did his constitution suddenly increase? Rain began to speculate. Was it due to practicing the giant bear breathing technique? This effect was too immediate. Wait, it couldn't be entirely due to the giant bear breathing technique. His previous swordsmanship training must have also laid a certain foundation, and his constitution was already on the verge of breaking through. Practicing the giant bear breathing technique today was an opportunity. This explanation was the most fitting for the situation. What an unexpected joy! After the increase, Rain immediately felt all the fatigue in his body dissipate. Thus, when he attempted the first posture of the giant bear breathing technique for the third time, perhaps due to the slight increase in constitution, he directly extended the duration to around 22 minutes, shocking the chief mage Shadia once again. And Clea, who stood nearby, also nodded in satisfaction at this moment. A very good night talent. Rain, dripping with sweat, finished his third attempt. Then he suddenly thought of a question, and after some consideration asked, "Lady Clea, do you know the fastest time someone has taken to master the first posture of the giant bear breathing technique?" Rain's question was truly not to boast, but to understand his current level. He wanted to avoid standing out too much and being considered a freak. Clea answered with a light smile. "As far as I know, the fastest person to learn the first posture of the giant bear breathing technique took about 5 minutes. After spending 5 minutes to grasp the essentials, that person then proceeded to maintain the posture for over 30 minutes straight." This made Rain's expression freeze, giving him the feeling that he was the fool he had been laughing at. "All right, that's enough for today. Rain, you should go back and rest. For the next few days, a maid will bring you here, and the giant bear breathing technique scroll will be kept safe by Shadia." "Yes, Lady Clea, Chief Mage Shadia." "Then I will take my leave," Rain said, bowing slightly. He left the back garden under the guidance of the original maid. On his way back, Rain's initially excited mood gradually calmed down as he seriously contemplated an issue. Today, he had obtained the giant bear breathing technique because Lady Clea saw potential in his talent. Otherwise, even with a system, if he wanted to step onto the transcendent path, it would probably be a long journey ahead. For the commoners of this world, stepping onto the transcendent path is much more difficult than it is for noble scions. For example, after Rain entered his room, he first ate a piece of savage bear meat, which was completely different from the meat he usually ate. Obviously, this type of meat was either extremely valuable or very difficult to capture. Without the backing of a power, ordinary commoners could hardly afford it. Rain thought to himself that without eating this piece of explosive bear meat, his current constitution wouldn't have been able to support him practicing the first form of the giant bear breathing technique continuously. Secondly, the black balsam oil he had used during the practice of the giant bear breathing technique. The recipe for it must be top secret, and the raw materials difficult to collect, of course. It might also be that the production process was complicated. He had just experienced it himself, practicing with and without the black balsam oil was completely different. The efficiency of his practice was at least 3 to 5 times worse. Looking at the experience, one was a half hour without any increase, but once he used the black balsam oil, it went up by 5 points in half an hour. The difference was huge. The third point was the advanced magic potion that Clea had casually mentioned. Although he still didn't know what it was, it seemed essential. Even for Clea, when she mentioned this magic potion, her face showed a slightly furrowed brow. Clearly, the advanced magic potion must be incredibly precious. All in all, if he wanted to proceed smoothly on the transcendent path, he needed money and the support of a major power behind him. This required showing others his value. This point, whether in his past life or this one, had not changed. After returning to the servant dormitory, George was the first to run over and ask, "Rain, what did the chief maid want with you?" The entire servant dormitory immediately quieted down. Rain looked around and saw that nearly every servant boy had pricked up their ears to listen. Rain couldn't help but laugh and said, "Guess." "Get out of here," George said with a laugh and a curse, his face full of expectation. However, since his close buddy didn't say anything, George didn't ask further, but the other servant boys were itching with curiosity. No wonder Rain dared to fight with thick brows. Turns out his family knows the chief maid. Yeah, it seems that Rain's family is not simple at all. But how come I heard that Rain is just the son of a farmer? The next day, the entry-level training with the dog trainer was still about playing with little dogs. According to the old man, the purpose of this training was to increase the intimacy between the dog and its owner. But this made Rain feel like he was wasting his life. I want to practice swordsmanship. I want to practice breathing techniques. All these thoughts crowded Rain's mind. However, Rain still held onto the hope that he might trigger another profession panel like beast tamer or beast taming, so he didn't make excuses to take leave. After ending a day's training with the dogs, Rain followed the beautiful maid once again to Lady Clea's study. He ate another piece of explosive bear meat. This time Rain took a careful look at the cut. It seemed to be bear ribs. Feeling unsated, Rain then thought about something. Isn't it said that the best part of the bear is the bear's paw? Too bad he had never eaten it in his previous life. He hoped to have a chance to taste it. This time, the paw of this explosive bear should be even more delicious than a regular bear's paw. Rain had assumed that today would be the same as yesterday to continue practicing the giant bear breathing technique. But today, Clea proposed a spar with Rain after he had practiced the first form of the giant bear breathing technique just once. This filled Rain with unexpected joy. He had been playing with dogs during the day for the past 2 days with almost no improvement in basic swordsmanship. Now the opportunity to spar was better than ever. Ding ding dang dang. Rain Carlin, giving his all, could still only hold out for about half a minute against Clea, who was deliberately holding back before quickly being defeated. Despite the sparring loss, there wasn't a trace of dejection on Rain's face, and there was even a hint of pleasure. Because a delightful system prompt sounded. Your skill basic swordsmanship has improved. Experience plus 29 you have engaged in a battle. Militia profession experience points plus 17 the chief maid. Shadia, watching the duel, looked admiringly at Rain, who showed no sign of discouragement and thought to herself. This is perhaps the reason Lady Crea values Rain. He never gets disheartened by failure. There are many young talents in Meister County whose strength outshines Rain's like stars in the sky, but none have Rain's temperament. After losing a spar with Lady Crea, they either wear a look of shame or they keep pestering shamelessly. No one is like Rain, who still looks delighted after a defeat. He truly loves swordsmanship. Clea, seeing Rain still eager to try again, had an even more appreciative look in her eyes, and she said in her clear voice, "Rain, your speed and strength are on par with mine. You should have been able to last longer, but do you know why you were defeated so quickly?" Is my swordsmanship still too weak?" Rain scratched his head. "Not entirely. Did you notice that every time you attack, you make your intentions too obvious?" The girl said while demonstrating with her bouncy long legs. "When you attack, look straight ahead, use the corner of your eyes to lock onto the target, and at no time should you expose your attacking intentions." Initially, Rain listened with a relaxed attitude, but as the noble girl spoke these words, Rain's expression turned serious as well, because Clea was teaching him extremely crucial combat skills. If Clea hadn't suddenly pointed this out, it would have taken Rain much longer to realize it. "Catching the enemy off guard, is that what you mean?" "Very well summed up," the girl praised. "That's exactly it. Once you reveal your attack intentions too soon, an experienced enemy will immediately dodge or block your attack route. Some may even deliberately lure you to attack their intentionally exposed weak spots, then quickly counterattack and defeat you." After pondering for a moment, Rain understood the girl's point. "Please, Lady Clea, let's try again." The girl nodded, signaling that Rain could attack again. This time, as Rain attacked, he kept his gaze level with the girl, his movements as light as a willow in the wind, and he swiftly took a step forward, thrusting his sword straight. The girl deftly blocked and stepped to the right, avoiding Rain's attack. This time, Rain's gaze stayed fixed on the girl, but he did not focus intently on any specific part of her body, which slightly slowed down Clea's anticipation compared to before, and the duel lasted noticeably longer than their previous bout. Suddenly, seizing an opportunity, Rain surged forward with a lunge, swinging a chopping attack, which the girl once again evaded with ease. During the exchanges deliberately set up by the girl, Rain and Clea went back and forth, with the sound of ding-ding-dang-dang of weapons clashing continuously echoing in the area. After a minute, exhausted, Rain lay on the ground, drenched in sweat. Although he was tired, the satisfying feeling of the exhilarating fight was so invigorating that Rain felt a tinge of longing for more. "Your skill basic swordsmanship has improved. Experience plus 37, you have engaged in a battle. Militia profession experience points plus 21 and then, There were those handfuls of experience points. Rain, I notice you have a particular interest in swordsmanship, and that's good. But also not so good. Clea saw that after every swordplay duel, Rain's unparalleled passion was rekindled. But breath control is the foundation. You need to spend more time to master the giant bear breathing technique's 7 movements as soon as possible. The sooner you master them, the better for your body's development, Clea advised. Yes, Lady Clea. Although Rain responded in this way, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. You don't understand. My lady, only by sparring more can I improve quickly. Rain had never felt time fly by so quickly. He now somewhat understood the feelings of those wealthy clients from his previous life's gym, who spent small fortunes inviting beautiful personal trainers to accompany their workouts. Just like now, with him not spending a penny, the youngest daughter of the Earl was his workout partner. Today's practice had already ended, but Rain was already looking forward to the next session. For 4 consecutive days, it was like this. And Rain's strength improved by leaps and bounds. Giant bear breathing technique LV2, 12/300, with the aid of the precious items, bear meat and black pine oil. Rain had already started practicing the second pose of the giant bear breathing technique, which resembled the Russian kettlebell swing, but was far more difficult than the first pose. Rain could only persist for 5 minutes at present, a far cry from the half-hour mark. However, it still added a bit of strength to Rain, bringing his strength to 7 points, surpassing that of an average adult. Though there wasn't much change in Rain's physical attributes data, his battle awareness had changed significantly. It could be said that the swordsmanship instructor Humbert taught Rain how to wield a sword, but Clea taught Rain how to truly fight. Profession, Blacksmith Apprentice LV3, 265/500, / Militiaman LV3, 78/500 remaining attribute points, 1 remaining skill points. 1 Basic Swordsmanship LV4, 578/1000, basic swordsmanship had still not leveled up, requiring too much experience, but although the swordsmanship had not leveled up, Rain felt his basic swordsmanship was slowly improving. The profession level of the militiaman, having risen to LV3, contributed another attribute point and a skill point to Rain. This time, Rain did not rush to allocate his points. The poses of the giant bear breathing technique became increasingly difficult. The second pose, though challenging, was certainly much easier compared to the third. He planned to wait until he reached level 3 of the breathing technique, then directly add points to move up to level 4. Saturday had come around again, and Rain could go home for a visit. Just as Rain was walking out of the castle in high spirits, accompanied by the beautiful maid, they encountered a tall young man dressed like a noble. "Master Dennis," said the pretty maid upon seeing the other party, seemingly trembling slightly. Greeted him fearfully. Although Rain didn't recognize the individual, he also inclined his body immediately in deference. This young man named Dennis glanced at them both and continued on his way, expressionless. However, having walked a small distance, he suddenly stopped. Watching the departing Rain, he seemed to recall something. Isn't that the commoner Clea seemed to appreciate a bit? And Rain, having left the Habsburg estate, walked along the main artery of the town. Facing the evening breeze, evening had fallen, and groups of 3 night watchmen, each holding a torch and clad in tight leather armor, had started adding oil to the street lamps. In this world, the night watchman's responsibilities Rain had come to understand primarily involved maintaining civil order at night, firefighting, dealing with wild beasts or other unknown creatures that struck from the shadows, and handling emergencies. During the relatively safe daylight hours, however, the duty of maintaining public security fell to officers of civil order. Whether night watchmen or officers of civil order, both were under the jurisdiction of the imperial authorities' local law enforcement and were a separate concept from ordinary militiamen. This distinction was apparent from their fine leather armor, and the horn bows on their backs and bastard swords hanging at their waists. As Rain hurried to his front door, he saw his thinly clad neighbor, a young girl named Anna, holding a small basket and waiting in the slightly chilly autumn wind. When she heard footsteps and looked up to see Rain returning, her face lit up with a sweet dimpled smile, and she approached him saying, "Rain, this is a pie I made from the wild blueberries and hazelnuts you gave me last time. I wanted to give it to you earlier, But Bo, he told me you had gone for child servant training and only came back Saturday nights. Looking at the small basket the girl handed over, a soft spot in Rain's heart was touched. This girl whose fate was so bleak always kept gratitude and kindness in her heart. He had merely let Bohi give her some wild fruits he had found, yet she thought about how to repay him. It was late autumn now, the evening breeze was cool after dark, and the thinly dressed girl had been waiting for him at the door all this time. Looking at the neatly arranged 5 slices of pie in the basket, Rain didn't even know what to say for a moment. After a long while, Rain stammered out, "You've given them all to me, what about you?" "I've kept a few slices, which is enough for me." The girl saw Rain accept the basket, smiled again, and cheerily turned to leave. Rain stared blankly at the girl, realizing he had even forgotten to say thank you. When Rain entered the house, Bohi saw the small blue basket in Rain's hands and gleefully asked, "Brother, is this for me?" Rain smiled and patted his little sister on the head. "This was made by your sister Anna." "Ah, Sister Anna made it. No wonder she hasn't been playing with me lately. She said she was helping Aunt Mary." "Yes, hardly anyone in the town wants to employ Sister Anna. But occasionally Aunt Mary lets Sister Anna help out. Sister Anna is very poor, and making pies requires flour, which is expensive. Sister Anna can only afford to buy flour by helping out." Bohi, with her innocent big eyes, looked at Rain and clearly narrated. Rain looked at the pies in the basket and fell silent. After dinner with the family, Rain went back to his room early and lay down to rest. But he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Suddenly, Rain thought he heard faint cries and the sound of something heavy falling next door. Rain's pupils dilated, immediately thinking of the recent child disappearance cases in the town. Could it be that the criminals had targeted Anna? Suddenly, a rush of blood surged to his head. At once, Rain jumped out of bed like a carp, looked around, grabbed a carpenter's hammer from the utility room and dashed out as nimbly as a cat. As he approached Anna's front door, the rustling voices, which had been unclear at first, were now increasingly clear. "This girl has a fierce temper. After you're done, boss, let me have a taste. There's just her in this house, don't worry. We're going to have a lovely night, hee. Damn, it's been a while since we had someone this tender. This is going to be enjoyable. Not to mention, Scarface, you've picked a nice spot. Aside from being a bit skinny, the girl is pretty." Another voice known as the boss spoke up. "After we're done, we can even sell her to the Brotherhood of the Wilderness. They've recently raised their prices, so we can make good money." "Boss, you can count on me. I was pushing a cart all over the south side of Flashgold Town just a couple of days ago." Whimpered. It seemed like the sound of Anna, her mouth covered, crying. Ordinary people might not hear clearly from this distance, but Rain, whose physical condition had greatly improved recently, heard everything loud and clear. The noise grew louder, and occasionally the sound of ceramic pots falling and shattering could be heard. The sound of linen tearing rang out. Rain stood at Anna's doorstep, feeling uneasy. He wanted to rush in to save her, but there were at least 2 thugs in Anna's room. If he acted rashly and failed, it could likely cost both him and Anna their lives. The cold night wind blew, gradually calming Rain down. Call the night watchman now. It would make too much noise and there wasn't enough time. Besides, if the night watchman cornered them, the thugs might even kill Anna outright. Ask his father for help. Remembering his father's aged face and stooped figure, Rain shook his head, erasing the thought from his mind. Rain looked again at the carpentry hammer in his hand, sharp on one end and round on the other, used by his father to repair old furniture at home. Although it was somewhat old, it was well preserved. Rain turned the sharp end upward, hiding the hammer in his somewhat loose sleeve, and stepped forward to knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. "Anna, are you home?" The room suddenly went quiet, and very faint voices could be heard. If Rain hadn't had exceptionally sharp hearing, he wouldn't have been able to make them out at all. "Boss, I'll go check. It sounds like a kid. Should I just grab him?" "Scarface, get rid of him quickly. We've got to enjoy ourselves tonight. Don't make too much noise." "Damn, this little girl might look thin, but she's pretty strong." Dull footsteps sounded in the room as if the person inside first peered through the crack of the door to check the outside, confirming that it was just a young kid outside, then creak. The door was opened. What caught Rain's eye was an unfamiliar face, without any scars, and he didn't know why the man was nicknamed Scarface. The curved yellow hair and the man's large, strong build gave Rain a vague sense of oppression. The man's hand was still on the hilt of his sword at his waist, his expression alert. "Kid, what do you want?" The man's fierce gaze took a closer look at the small, thin kid in front of him, and after confirming that he posed no threat, he relaxed somewhat and asked, "You? Who are you?" "I am here to see Anna. Isn't this Anna's house?" Rain feigned a cringing demeanor, his expression terrified. "I'm Anna's uncle. Anna and her aunt already left Flashgold Town. This house belongs to me now. You don't need to come here anymore." Scarface forced a smile, carelessly concocted a lie akin to a creepy uncle deceiving a child. How? How could Anna just leave so suddenly? She didn't even say goodbye to us." Rain muttered under his breath, his fists clenched, seemingly unwilling to accept that a budding romance was over before it had even begun. If it had been another time, Scarface might have teased the kid in front of him, but now he was too busy with more pressing matters to chat idly with a kid. "All right, move along now." Digging into his groin, Scarface impatiently waved his hand, signaling for Rain to leave quickly. Okay, but, Mr. Anna's uncle, could you please pass a small gift to Anna for me?" Okay, give it here." Scarface paused but didn't think too much and reached out his hand. All he wanted now was to quickly get rid of this annoying kid. The small hammer slid from Rain's sleeve into his palm and was immediately gripped tightly. Meanwhile, Rain continued to speak calmly. "I've prepared for Anna." Just as Scarface was about to hear what Rain had prepared, bending slightly forward to take what was in Rain's hand, he suddenly couldn't see the kid's hands clearly, they were a blur. Suddenly, Scarface felt a pang of fear, his scalp tingling. A strong gust hit face on, the pressure blowing Scarface's curly yellow hair wildly about. A black spot appeared in Scarface's vision, and suddenly it enlarged, turning out to be the sharp end of the small hammer. The unsuspecting scarred face became motionless in an instant, a small pointed hammer nailed between his eyebrows, eyes wide open. Look of disbelief on his face. The next second, his entire body slowly fell forward. A pair of small but fierce hands suddenly appeared in front of the heavy body, steadily catching the still twitching frame of the scarred face. He laid it gently down beside the porch outside, without making a sound. Despite how stable Rain's hands appeared just now, at this moment, his heart was pounding violently. Just before launching the attack, he had put the remaining few attribute points into agility. For an ambush, Rain believed speed was unbeatable. If fast enough, even a bird could break through the bulletproof glass of an airplane. Besides, Rain was wielding a carpenter's hammer. After removing the short sword and a delicate hand crossbow from the scarred face's waist, Rain peered through the window, aimed with the hand crossbow first, no movement. Inside, a man with a full black beard was in the process of taking off his pants. The exposed young girl had already captured over 90% of his attention. He hadn't noticed a slim shadow had already arrived behind him. A black crossbow arrow hit the large back of the bearded man, who immediately let out a piercing scream. Then the bearded man turned his head fiercely to look behind, but before he could see who had ambushed him, a strong gust of wind hit his face. A sharp short sword inserted into his throat. Bearded man, pants not yet pulled up, hands clasping his neck wound, eyes bulging. Looked at the slender Rain in astonishment. Seemingly unwilling to fall, he stumbled backward several times, slamming heavily against the wooden table before his body slowly collapsed, convulsing intermittently, like a snake stripped of its spine. Rain had just used all his strength to make this overpowered striding thrust. Rain gasped for air, his body soaked in sweat, standing still in place. If not for his chest heaving rapidly, one might mistake him for a statue. That last thrust seemed to have sapped all of Rain's energy. This was Rain's first kill in 2 lifetimes. At this moment, Rain only felt exhausted, a trace of confusion in his eyes. "No, I didn't kill, I protected someone." After a long pause, the trace of confusion in Rain's eyes gradually dissipated, his clenched fists and eyes gradually brightening as if he realized something. Coming to such a transcendent world, even if I'm powerless to do much, I must at least survive well. To be able to protect myself, protect my family. And if I am capable, then protect those I want to protect. At that moment, Anna was shivering, covering her fair body with a tattered linen cloak, resembling a frightened little deer, timidly looking at Rain. When her tear-filled big eyes finally recognized her rescuer as the familiar Rain, she couldn't help but fling herself on him, embracing Rain tightly. Faced with the girl's warm body, Rain had absolutely no other thoughts. He gently patted Anna's back and said softly, "Don't be afraid, it's safe now. Anna, put on your clothes first. Just to be safe, I'll go check again." Suddenly, Anna let out a shy cry, only then realizing she was practically nude. Blushing, she immediately began to dress. It seemed that in an attempt to avoid Rain's gaze, she turned away, inadvertently presenting a beautiful curve to him. Suddenly, Rain froze. He sensed something amiss at the entrance of Anna's home. His mind screamed, not good. The intruder must have found the body at the door. Instantly, the romantic atmosphere that had filled the air vanished. "Hurry and get dressed," Rain urgently instructed as he pulled the sharp dagger from Blackbeard's throat. Bringing with it a trail of blood, Rain turned immediately, positioning Anna behind him and facing the door with the tip of his sword. Anna began to hurriedly dress, noticing Rain's tense expression and understanding that danger might descend upon them again. It looked like he would have to waste skill points, just as Rain was considering adding them to the giant bear breathing technique. A figure Rain found familiar, yet loathsome, appeared in the doorway, followed by several fully armed elite night watchmen. "It's him." Rain couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and his entire body relaxed. Lord Hamilton, seeing the scene before him, was many times more astounded than Rain. He had finally received accurate information, having heard that a suspect in the children's disappearance case might be active in this area tonight, but he never expected to walk into such a scenario. Is this really the work of a child? Did he actually kill 2 outlaws listed on the wanted poster? Although the outlaw's strength was not deemed impressive, that was in comparison to himself. There was no way that 2 hardened criminals could be taken out by an ordinary youth. But the bloody reality informed Lord Hamilton, the town's sheriff, that this lean young boy with the blood sword was indeed the culprit behind everything. If Rain's composure and talent when dealing with drunkard Jack had impressed Lord Hamilton, sparking a sense of valuing talented individuals, then what Rain had done this time was truly shocking to Lord Hamilton. Clearly, Rain could not have simply charged in and fought the 2 outlaws head-on and killed them, especially since there was a frail girl here who could have been taken hostage by the criminals. In such a scenario, even if it were him coming to the rescue, he would find it somewhat troublesome because he had to consider the girl's safety. Under these circumstances, the fact that Rain managed to save the girl and kill the 2 outlaws proved his bravery and strategic mind. From this moment on, Lord Hamilton regarded Rain with newfound respect. In his heart, he no longer saw Rain as just a child, but as equivalent to one of his own elite night watchmen. Lord Hamilton's eyes flickered, examining Rain up and down several times, and he praised inwardly. After having killed and seen blood, Rain's entire spirit state is indeed different. If the previous Rain still had a hint of immaturity, like a rough gemstone, then the current Rain seemed like a gemstone that had just been polished on one side, beginning to shine with a light that demanded attention. "Did you do this?" Although he already knew the answer, Lord Hamilton asked once more. "Yes, sir. These 2 men broke in late at night with the intention of raping the young girl. I happened to be nearby, heard the noise, and killed them both. Sheriff, according to the Imperial Security Management regulations, I shouldn't be breaking any law this time, should I?" After the killing, the completely transformed Rain spoke confidently. Just now, Rain thought it over. There was no need to hide anything from Lord Hamilton. He had interacted with Lord Hamilton before and knew that this experienced sheriff might view any concealment as a potential sign of guilt. "Haha, of course, you're not breaking the law. Rain, come, tell me how you managed to kill these 2. Your strength is decent, but it would be nearly impossible for you to directly kill either of them in a head-on fight," Lord Hamilton said with a laugh as he walked toward Rain and waved his hand to the night watchman behind him. The elite night watchman in black leather armor entered and began to deal with the bodies on the ground. When they first saw the bodies, they were all stunned, clearly shocked as well. They glanced at Rain, and their eyes seemed to say that such a small kid could be so ruthlessly efficient. Soon, a capable night watchman came forward to report. Lord Hamilton, among the 2 deceased, one was wearing a skin mask confirmed to be Scarface, and the other was Blackbeard, both suspects in the children's disappearance case we've been pursuing. Additionally, these 2 men were also outlaws listed on the wanted poster. "Very well. Remove the body and clean up the traces in the room," Lord Hamilton nodded. Upon hearing a string of keywords, Rain's heart was initially puzzled, but then he was startled, obviously frightened. He hadn't expected these 2 were wanted criminals. He was indeed lucky to have killed them both. It was partly due to luck. Scarface had been fooled by his frail appearance and acting skills, while the black-bearded man was driven by lust, focused entirely on Anna. If they had been slightly more cautious, under normal circumstances, he could have been turned over by either of them. But why does the name Scarface sound so familiar? That's right. It's that guy worth a full 5 imperial gold coins. Rain's eyes lit up, instantly remembering the notorious bandit known as Scarface and the bounty amount on the wanted poster. This means he could claim a substantial reward. And what about that black-bearded guy who called Scarface boss? Shouldn't he be worth even more? A wave of joy swept over Rain's heart. Lord Hamilton, about the reward. You want the reward? Come to the town's administration office tomorrow to find me. Lord Hamilton glanced at Rain with a smile that was not quite a smile, then turned and left. Rain felt that there was something hidden in the other man's eyes. Getting the reward tomorrow might not be so straightforward. The night watchman quickly carried away the bodies inside the room and at the door and dealt with the bloodstains crudely, but the room still reeked of a heavy scent of blood. After all, 2 people had just died here. Rain glanced at Anna, who was still shivering violently. Clearly, it was no longer suitable for her to stay here. He was quite troubled, but eventually thought that the only option was to let Anna stay at his home for the time being. Anna, please don't mention what happened tonight to my parents or to Bohi, all right? Rain crouched down, gently speaking to Anna, whose large eyes still held traces of fright. Anna didn't speak, but instinctively nodded her head. Gently picking up the somewhat limp girl, Rain returned to his own house next door. Perhaps because Rain was guarding her side, the girl fell into a deep sleep in the latter half of the night, with tears glistening on her long eyelashes. Although the matter was resolved and he felt very exhausted, Rain couldn't fall asleep at once. The scene of the murder and the ferocious expressions of the 2 men as they lay dying replayed in his mind like a slideshow. Suddenly, Rain remembered that the system seemed to have sent a notification, but until now, he hadn't had the chance to check it. You've been through a battle. Militiaman Professional Experience Points plus 121. You've been through a battle. Militiaman Professional Experience Points plus 129. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has improved. Experience plus 30 for the Militiaman Profession level has risen that much. Rain stared at his Militiaman LV3. 328 over 500, on the panel, lost in thought. It seems that dangerous real combat is the best way to increase experience points. Although there was a young girl sleeping in the same room with him, the atmosphere couldn't be any further from being romantic or intimate. Looking at Anna, who was curled up and exuded an extreme lack of security even through her sleeping posture, Rain couldn't muster the slightest desire for this pitiful but tenacious and optimistic fragile girl. Clearly, Miss Clea, with her bouncy long legs and curvaceous figure, held more allure in Rain's heart. The next morning, under his parents' astonished gazes, Rain took Anna downstairs for breakfast, with only Bohi looking quite happy about it. Father, Anna's home had some strangers knocking on the door yesterday. And considering the recent cases of missing children, I decided to bring Anna over. Let's have Anna stay with us for a while, Rain said, mixing truth with fiction. Old Rain glanced at Anna, who was eating shyly with her head down, and said with a smile, All right, it looks like you're the lucky one, you scamp. Rain, you have to be nice to that girl Anna. His mother chimed in cheerfully, mincing no words. This made Anna blush deeply, her head nearly touching the table. Mother, we're not in the kind of relationship you're imagining. Rain helplessly rubbed his forehead, saying, Is that so? Then let me ask you, did you or did you not rest in the same room with her last night? The mother, considering Anna was right beside them, didn't put it more directly. That's because Anna was scared. Rain explained, powerless. At this point, old Rain interjected with a somewhat serious expression. Rain, as a man, you must learn to take responsibility. Anna is a good girl and you can't let her down. Great, now look what's happened. The misunderstanding couldn't be any bigger, but faced with his parents' advice, Rain could only listen obediently for now and find an opportunity to tell them the truth later. After breakfast, Rain almost fled to the town hall. After being announced by the guard at the door, a guard escorted Rain to Lord Hamilton's office. As the town's security officer, Lord Hamilton's status was second only to the governor. In some respects, given his control over the security forces and the Night Watcher's army, and from the perspective of maintaining regional stability, a region's security officer is an even more important role than the governor. Knock, knock, knock. The guard knocked on the door. Come in, a deep and resonant voice responded. The guard opened the door, and as Rain walked into the room, he saw Lord Hamilton, dressed in noble hunting attire, sitting behind a mahogany desk in the room, currently browsing through some documents. Lord Hamilton looked up, and without bothering with pleasantries, simply said, "Rain, take a seat first. I'm looking at a file here, give me a moment." Rain nodded, pulled out a chair to sit down, and then began to look around. The office was bright and spacious, about 40 to 50 square meters in size, with several soft deerskin chairs and a coffee table in the central area and bookshelves on the sides. The wall side of the office held the mahogany desk. Lord Hamilton was currently seated. Top of it stacked a large number of parchment rolls that appeared to be various files and documents. Before Rain could finish surveying the room, Lord Hamilton put down the file he was examining, looked at Rain with a smile, and said, "Rain, your growth has exceeded my expectations. Are you interested in joining the night watchman's squad? To help me see all these files, they are all unresolved cases left by that fool Kuzma. Recently, I've been severely understaffed. In fact, the entire Meister County security situation is not looking good. The day before yesterday, in the southwest of Flashgold Town, at a limb mine, 3 miners went missing. It is said that some unidentified creatures appeared inside the gold mine and only bloodstains were found at the scene. Also, just yesterday, my guards reported finding traces of foul finmen around the source of water for our town, upstream from Glimmer Lake. Bear in mind, these disgusting creatures heavily pollute the water. But right now, I don't have enough manpower to drive them away." Lord Hamilton pointed at the stack of parchment files on his mahogany desk, saying with a hint of anger, "Kuzma." Rain had heard this name before, mentioned by the faux rich kids during their idle chatter. He was the former security officer of Flashgold Town, and it seemed he left Lord Hamilton, the new appointee, with a multitude of messy issues to deal with. After some thought, Rain was not interested in Hamilton's invitation. Although night watchmen were also civil servants, officially organized under the Empire, there was no need. With Lady Clea's high regard for him, Rain could currently lay a solid foundation at the Habsburg estate, safe and sound. Seemingly guessing Rain's thoughts, Hamilton pulled out a gray pouch from the drawer and tossed it to Rain. "This is the bounty, 5 gold coins for Scarface, 10 for Blackbeard, totaling 15 imperial gold coins." Rain quickly caught the pouch, feeling exceptionally thrilled inside. He really hadn't expected that, even though he hadn't agreed to Hamilton's recruitment, the man would neither withhold nor pinch him over the bounty issue. This suddenly improved Rain's impression of Hamilton by quite a bit. This delight lasted only a few seconds before Hamilton's next words dissipated it like smoke. "Rain, I must remind you, the Scarface you killed had no noble background, but Blackbeard, on the other hand, has a brother who is the boss of the Hyena gang in Meister County, and he's very powerful. Just now, I was reviewing the dossier on Blackbeard," said Hamilton as he handed over the parchment roll to Rain. Rain took the sheepskin roll and immediately started reading through the dossier. Only, the more he read, the more solemn his expression became. The dossier showed that the Hyena gang commanded hundreds of men and dealt in all kinds of dirty deeds, like theft, extortion of protection fees, and occasionally even more detestable acts like trafficking women and children. What was especially noted in the dossier was that the Hyena gang's boss, nicknamed the Canine King Kor, had managed through some unknown means to tame a mutant hyena queen, as large as a boar, a few years ago. After raising a litter of pups, he equipped his core members with them. Dependent on the hyena's combat abilities, which far exceeded those of ordinary dogs, the Hyena gang quickly rose above other gangs in Meister County, and it was rumored they even made connections with certain nobility in the city. Faced with such an unscrupulous gang, Rain knew that even if he wasn't afraid, his family certainly couldn't afford to provoke them. Realizing this, Rain knew that he could only rely on the law enforcement officer before him to escape this predicament. That was also the purpose of Hamilton showing him the dossier. Hamilton continued speaking. "As I understand it, Blackbeard had a good relationship with his brother. Came out on his own this time to make some easy money. If his brother finds out his own sibling was killed by you, he will surely seek revenge." After a few seconds of silence, Rain, with a calm expression, looked at Hamilton and said, "Lord Hamilton, since you took the initiative to discuss this matter with me, you must have a way to resolve it." Appreciation gleamed in Hamilton's eyes. He himself, at Rain's age, probably couldn't have faced the situation as calmly as Rain did. Just as he was about to share his thoughts, suddenly, Hamilton's eyes brightened as he looked at Rain. He had just noticed a significant change in Rain, who was sitting across from him, compared to the last time they met. The events of the previous night had happened in the dark, and Hamilton had not noticed Rain's transformation due to the dim light. But today was daytime, and after scrutinizing Rain closely, Hamilton realized that his eyes were bright and spirited, his breathing steady and strong, bearing a great resemblance to how Hamilton himself had been when he first began learning the night breathing method. Hamilton couldn't help but blurt out, "Rain, have you practiced the night breathing method?" This sudden realization alarmed Rain. However, Rain remained silent, maintaining a smile and calmly looking at Hamilton. To this, Hamilton didn't seem to mind. Instead, he appeared thoughtful and murmured to himself, "You have been training as a child servant on the Habsburg estate recently, which means that one of the knights within the Habsburgs must have taught you the breathing method. So is this knight His Excellency, the estate steward Knight Lloyd, or the swordsmanship instructor Sir Perez?" Hamilton's gaze was piercing as he watched Rain, trying to discern something from his expression. This made Rain re-evaluate Hamilton once again. He hadn't expected that this robust man before him would have such a delicate mind, nearly guessing the whole matter correctly. Except for the last part about the person involved. "I'm sorry, Lord Hamilton, but I cannot reveal which lord taught me the breathing method, because I have promised to keep this secret." "Ha, good lad. However, the infighting among the heirs of the Count Habs family is intense, and joining the estate might not necessarily be a good thing for you. The Count's two sons are fighting over power and profit, while his young daughter has an exceptional knightly talent, having become an official knight 2 years ago and deeply favored by the old Count." Hamilton waved his hand, obviously not minding whether Rain spoke or not, but instead revealed a significant secret to him. Was it Lady Creia and her brothers, or brother against brother? No wonder earlier Lady Creia said that she wanted the fact that she taught me the breathing method kept a secret, and mentioned that letting it out might not be good for me. Rain suddenly understood. And the eldest son of the Count Habs, Alonso, has dubious relations with the Wilderness Brotherhood. So Rain, as a talented individual, joining the Night Watcher's army and serving the Empire would be your best choice. Hamilton slowly stood up, his bright eyes seriously fixed on Rain as he spoke. At that moment he thought, since Rain has already gained the appreciation of the upper echelons of the Habsburg estate and has practiced breathing techniques, it wouldn't be quite appropriate for him to pretend to be an orphan to infiltrate the enemy, as I had originally thought. Once you join the Night Watcher's army, I will have reason to move our already stretched forces and pay special attention to the area. Your family lives, ensuring the safety of you and your family. Against the threats of the Hyena Gang, the Night Watchman will be your solid support. Hamilton's words were very enticing to Rain. The information that the other party had shared was high-end information that Rain had never been privy to, but he believed that Hamilton wouldn't deceive him on this matter. After all, some things are very easy to verify. Seeing that Rain was still hesitant, Hamilton continued to up the ante. "Rain, practicing the breathing method isn't cheap. You have completed 2 bounty tasks this time, earning more than 10 Imperial gold coins, which meets the minimum requirement to apply for an Imperial bounty hunter's license." Rain strongly agreed with Hamilton's words, as cultivating the breathing method was indeed expensive. If it weren't for Lady Creia providing him with berserker bear meat and the specialized secret medicine for the giant bear breathing technique, Black Chiron oil, his progress wouldn't be this rapid. However, what puzzled Rain was this bounty hunter's license. What was that all about? Shouldn't anyone be able to kill a wanted criminal and thus receive the bounty? "I apologize, Lord Hamilton. Does a bounty hunter still need a permit?" Rain asked, puzzled. "Haha, Rain, it seems I need to explain to you that if you are the offspring of nobility, of course, you don't need this bounty hunter permit. But for a person of common status who aspires to rely on bounties as a source of income, having this permit can be very convenient. Firstly, the bounty hunter's permit is universally recognized by the Empire. It allows you to carry weapons during the day or at night. Otherwise, according to the Empire's public security regulations, civilians can only keep their weapons at home, except under special circumstances. Moreover, if one day the total amount of your accumulated bounties reaches 100 gold coins or more, you can apply for intermediate bounty hunter certification, which grants you the privilege of riding a horse. This immediately left Rain stunned. Official recognition of all-day weapon carrying and horse riding. Were these privileges, normally reserved for the nobility, also available to bounty hunters? Indeed, in this world military strength was the best pathway to class ascension. However, the Empire controls the number of bounty hunter slots quite strictly, but as it happens, I still have one recommendation slot available, Hamilton continued. Rain appeared pensive, naturally very tempted by the bounty hunter slot. Bearing arms, riding, and earning a considerable amount of gold coins were crucial elements on his transcendental path. Because even if he became an estate guard or even a night watchman, the basic salary would definitely not suffice for his training. However, since Hamilton had already mentioned the scarcity of these slots, it was clear there were no pies falling from the sky. Actually, some things were already quite clear between the lines. But the issue was that he had already accepted Lady Clea's kindness, and now to switch to joining the Night Watcher's army. After hesitating for a moment, Rain spoke up. Lord Hamilton, I'm very grateful for your appreciation, but I have already promised someone else. I might become a follower of a certain noble in the future, so. Before Rain could finish, Hamilton laughed heartily. So that's what you are worried about. Rest assured, Rain, that is not a conflict at all. No matter whose follower you are, as long as he is a noble of the Empire, you will inevitably pledge allegiance to our great Empire Emperor of the Dragon Empire. For example, I am the safety officer of Flashgold Town, and at the same time a follower of Marquis Habsburg. My official position within the Empire's administration actually counts as a plus in front of Marquis Habsburg. Rain was suddenly astonished. So there was such a crafty move. Shouldn't it be, the vassal's vassal is not my vassal? However, Rain quickly realized that the Dragon Empire he was in was not like the medieval Western Europe of his previous life, where kingdoms were fragmented. Instead, the central authority was very strong, and naturally, everyone pledged allegiance to the Empire Emperor. After Hamilton's explanation, Rain quickly understood that it was very favorable for the Empire's nobles to have their followers become administrative officials in the kingdom's power departments. By the way, Rain, you haven't undergone the ceremony of swearing allegiance as a follower yet, have you? Hamilton inquired. Rain thought indeed there had been no form of allegiance ceremony between himself and Lady Clea. Her exact words were that he could become her follower if he could step into the role of a formal knight. Then you should improve your strength quickly. It would be better to swear allegiance as a guardian knight, rather than just as a follower, Hamilton said. Lord Hamilton, is there a difference? Rain asked, somewhat astonished. Although the amount of information he encountered today was somewhat overwhelming, it also made him feel that his visit was well worth it. A short conversation with Hamilton had enlightened him about many things that he had had no access to before. That was the barrier to information caused by differing social strata. Simply put, it's about having different levels of initiative. You can be the guardian knight for many people, but you can only be a follower to one. Hamilton thought for a moment, then explained. Thank you, Lord Hamilton, for clearing my confusion. As for your gracious offer to join the Night Watchman, I accept. However, I am currently still in my page training period. Could I possibly join the Night Watchman after it ends? Rain inquired. Of course you can. The page training at Habsburg Manor is quite exceptional. It's just right for you to also learn archery. Hamilton seemed quite familiar with the page training, knowing that it included archery instruction. But if there's something I need from you, Rain, you'll need to respond immediately, Hamilton added. Of course, Lord Hamilton, Rain agreed. The meeting ended in a harmonious atmosphere. Rain carefully pocketed the gray pouch containing 15 Empire gold coins and said farewell to Hamilton, leaving the town hall of Flashgold Town. With the fortune now in his possession, Rain felt an extraordinary sense of joy. However, the threat of the Hyena Gang quickly spoiled his mood. Who would have thought that the leader of the Hyena Gang corps was actually Blackbeard's brother? Strength, I must quickly increase my strength, however. Previously it was a lack of money. But now with money in hand, Rain naturally thought of slightly improving his family's living conditions. As for the excuse, he had already worked it out. He would tell them that he received a reward of 2 Empire gold coins for providing Lord Hamilton, the new sheriff, with crucial clues in a child disappearance case. Then he would tell his family that Lord Hamilton had agreed to let him join the Night Watcher's army after his page training concludes. With this, his family wouldn't have to worry about his future, and the lifted burden would greatly improve the mood of the entire family, while also allowing himself to fully utilize the 2 gold coins. However, it was still early in the day. Not yet 9 o'clock, Rain decided to continue his work at the blacksmith shop to gain more professional experience. Oh, speaking of the blacksmith shop, yes, now that he had money, he could completely ask the blacksmith Boris to teach him real forging skills. The barrier before was that he couldn't afford it, no money, but now all that was needed was to pay a hefty tuition fee. Of course, it was worth it. If he could greatly improve the efficiency of gaining experience, it would not only allow his blacksmith apprenticeship profession level to rise rapidly, but also lay a solid foundation for crafting his own equipment later. Thinking of this, Rain felt a surge of excitement. Thus, Rain turned left and right, rushing to the blacksmith shop. As soon as he entered the blacksmith shop, the continuous clang of hammering filled the air. The blacksmith apprentices were still busy at their work, and blacksmith Boris was in the midst of horseshoe forging, which immediately caught Rain's eye. This horseshoe forging, combined with hoof trimming, was precisely the complete set. Boris placed an iron bar of about half a meter into the fire to heat it. Once the middle turned white hot, he took it out, brushed away the impurities on the surface, then immersed it in water for quenching. Quenching was a process Rain was familiar with from his previous life. It made the iron bar much harder. Soon, through repeated hammering and heating, the iron bar gradually took on the shape of a crescent moon. Seeing Rain come in, Drews, who was working the bellows, greeted him eagerly. "Rain, you're here to help again today. Want to continue with the bellows?" Rain smiled and said, "Drews, I'm sorry, but I might not be able to work the bellows today." Under Drews' astonished gaze, Rain walked up to Boris and pointed to the horseshoe in the making. "Uncle Boris, I want to learn this." "How much is the tuition fee?" The blacksmith Boris looked at Rain in surprise and said, "Rain, you have money. You are not my official apprentice. If you just want to learn horseshoe forging, the tuition is not cheap. Even though you have helped for free, I can't give you a discount on how much I should charge." After listening to this, Rain couldn't help but inwardly scoff. The rumors were true. Blacksmith Boris was quite skilled, but exceedingly stingy. "Of course, Uncle Boris. How much is the tuition to learn horseshoe forging?" "To teach you horseshoe forging for a month. 12 silver coins. If you can't learn it when the time's up, there's nothing I can do about it, but the tuition is non-refundable." Yes. Hearing this price, the surrounding apprentices exchanged glances, as if to say that this time Rain was likely to suffer a self-inflicted disappointment. After all, this price was indeed too high for most people, let alone Rain, who did not come from a well-off family. Rain was also speechless. Just for 1 month, and without guarantee of success. You should know that in Flashgold Town, the monthly income of an ordinary adult male is only about 2 to 3 silver coins. The currency system of the Dragon Empire was a bit similar to Rain's previous life in England. 1 gold coin of the Empire could be exchanged for 12 silver coins, 1 silver coin for 20 shillings, 1 shilling for 12 pennies, and 1 penny had the purchasing power of about 1 pound of rye bread. But he still had to learn. Rain feigned an expression of great distress and pulled out a gold coin from his embrace, handing it to the slightly surprised Boris. "Deal. Uncle Boris, this time, my family signed me up for the Habsburg Manners Page training, aiming for a blacksmith apprentice. Oh, they specifically prepared some money for me to learn the essential blacksmith skills." Rain half-truthfully explained, accounting for the source of the money. "It seems old Rain has high hopes for you. Work hard, lad. Don't end up like my good-for-nothing boy, wandering off to county town every day, now completely untraceable." Boris suddenly became emotional, patting Rain on the shoulder with a sigh. This made Rain change his opinion of Boris a bit, realizing that even a stingy man like Boris had the heart of a father wanting his son to succeed. "Come on, Rain, give me a hand here." With that, blacksmith Boris handed Rain a heavy hammer. Just as Rain grasped the hammer handed to him by Boris, suddenly a string of system notifications appeared, causing Rain to be slightly startled. "Ding! Host has come into contact with the blacksmith apprentice promotion medium blacksmith's hammer. Preconditions for promotion to blacksmith. 1. Blacksmith apprentice LV3 at full level. 2. Strength of at least 6 points, constitution of at least 6 points. 3. Forge 10 qualifying blacksmith products. Current conditions do not meet the requirements. Promotion to blacksmith failed." Rain was immediately thrilled, So this was the key to advancing from blacksmith apprentice to blacksmith. Rain, what are you standing around for? Oh, right away, Uncle Boris. Quickly coming back to his senses, Rain immediately began to assist with the forging. Being new to the craft, Rain only needed to complete one step, indenting a groove in the U-shaped iron bar. After the iron bar for the horseshoe was shaped into a crescent, the following steps required two people to work together. Blacksmith Boris clamped the iron bar with his left hand and heated it up again while holding a sharp tool in his right hand, shaped like an axe, moving it swiftly over the iron bar. Meanwhile, Rain swung the hammer forcefully in rhythm, striking the wider top of the axe, whose blade was relatively narrow, leaving a slender groove in the hot iron bar under the heavy blow. This groove in the horseshoe was to accommodate the soil on the ground to enhance the grip of the horseshoe. Although Boris charged extortionately, his teaching attitude was commendable. He guided Rain on the rhythm of force application while explaining to Rain the complete experience of horseshoe forging. This benefited Rain a great deal. Before long, the system prompt appeared again. You have engaged in horseshoe forging, and your insight has improved. You have realized a new skill: horseshoe forging. Your skill in horseshoe forging has improved. Experience +2. You focused on forging horseshoes. Blacksmith apprentice professional experience points +5. Clearly, after participating in the horseshoe forging, the professional experience points of the blacksmith apprentice soared, far surpassing previous bellows pulling work. This might be the essence of pay to win. At the same time, one after another, qualified horseshoes were forged by Rain and Boris. But unfortunately, perhaps because most of this part of the work was completed by Boris, the system did not recognize these horseshoes as being forged by Rain. Naturally, this did not meet the condition of forging 10 qualified blacksmith products. This left Rain slightly disappointed. He still wanted to advance to a blacksmith as quickly as possible. However, apart from horseshoes, what else could be learned quickly? That would be the nails used for horseshoes. These items are relatively simple to make, and logically, the horseshoe nails should also count as blacksmith products. Rain remembered a saying from his past life. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. So, even though the horseshoe nail was small, it was equally important. Seizing the moment during a break, Rain asked Boris if he could start learning the skill of forging horseshoe nails first. Although Boris found it strange that Rain was insistent on learning how to forge horseshoe nails before the more important horseshoes, after giving it a bit of thought, he quickly agreed. The reason was that the forging of horseshoe nails was also part of the lesson fee paid by Rain. After all, once the horseshoes were made, they needed to be used in conjunction with horseshoe nails, and the sequence didn't matter. Rain managed to contain his small surge of excitement and began to seriously forge horseshoe nails, following Boris's instructions. At first, the horseshoe nails that Rain produced were all bent and unusable, but slowly, the quality began to improve. Indeed, as Rain had previously guessed, the system recognized the horseshoe nails as falling within the category of any qualified blacksmith product. With that realization, Rain was overjoyed. Like he had been injected with chicken blood, he swung the hammer vigorously, dripping with sweat as he forged the horseshoe nails. Boris, on the other hand, looked at the enthusiastic Rain working on the horseshoe nails, shook his head and said, "What a strange habit." Finally, before lunch, Rain achieved both of his goals. Any qualified blacksmith product, 10/10, achieved. Blacksmith apprentice LV3. 500/500, max level achieved. Conditions detected for host upgrade to blacksmith. 1. Blacksmith apprentice LV3 max level 2. Strength above 6 points, constitution above 6 points. 3. Forge 10 qualifying blacksmith products. All conditions met. Upgrade to blacksmith yes/no. Note: after upgrading to blacksmith, the new blacksmith profession panel will replace the original blacksmith apprentice panel. Clearly, this question did not require any consideration. Rain chose yes without hesitation. Ding, upgrade successful. Upgrade to blacksmith successful. Strength +2. Gain core blacksmith skills. Blacksmith strength LV1. One-handed hammer mastery LV1. Blacksmith strength LV1 active. Due to years of forging, the blacksmith possesses unusual explosive muscle strength. Hammer mastery LV1 passive. Familiar with hammers both big and small from years of forging, they are used as extensions of his own limbs. His core skills have emerged. Rain was both shocked and delighted. This promotion truly represents a qualitative leap. After informing blacksmith Boris that he would go home for lunch and return in the afternoon, Rain swiftly left the blacksmith shop, went around the corner of the street, and immediately found a secluded corner to carefully examine his attribute panel. The original blacksmith apprentice panel had disappeared, replaced with the blacksmith panel. At the same time, two brand new skill icons at the bottom of the panel flickered slightly, and from their size, the icons for the core skills seemed to be almost twice as large as those for ordinary skills. Rain first focused his attention on an icon, resembling Popeye flexing his biceps, and beneath it there was a line of text. Core skill, Blacksmith Strength LV1, active, Blacksmith Strength LV1, active effects. Upon skill activation, your strength will slightly increase. Note: the skill effect will proportionally increase based on the host's own strength, and its duration is proportional to the host's constitution and spiritual power. Upon reading this, Rain quickly fell into deep thought. The additional 2 points of strength gained after the upgrade to Blacksmith allowed Rain's strength attribute to surpass his previously highest spirit attribute, becoming his strongest attribute. It's worth noting that 9 points of strength already greatly exceeded that of an average adult male. And it was probably slightly superior even compared to the elite members of Lord Hamilton's Night Watchers army. Feeling the surge of strength throughout his body brought Rain a burst of joy. Before the upgrade, even if the profession levels of blacksmith apprentice or militia were to increase, each level would only grant 1 attribute point. But now, just by upgrading, Rain had gained 2 additional points of strength. The increase was significant. At the same time, with this active skill Blacksmith Strength, which could further enhance strength, Rain was very eager to try it out immediately. But there was nothing suitable around, and making too much noise would draw unnecessary attention. After a brief thought, Rain decided to head home, neglecting to even stop for groceries, remembering that there were some scattered large rocks along the way home that he could try his hand at. Swiftly, while walking home, Rain, looking around, quickly spotted a nearly half-human-high piece of stone not far off the roadside. So, after again making sure no one was around, Rain, eager to attempt, approached the stone. With 9 points of strength, Rain, who originally would not have been able to move the heavy rock, now lifted it, although he turned red and found it strenuous. However, he now managed to stably hold it, lifting it a few feet off the ground. However, to advance further and lift the 200 to 300-pound rock over his head, 9 points of strength still fell a bit short. Thus, Rain focused his attention on Blacksmith Strength. As the skill was activated, suddenly, a warm surge pumped from his heart, accelerating Rain's blood flow, causing his veins to bulge and the muscles in his arms and shoulders to protrude. Rain then forcibly lifted the heavy rock above his head and threw it 4 to 5 meters away. After throwing the rock, a delightful sensation instantly surged through his heart. This was the confidence and exhilaration that great strength brings to a man. Then Rain glanced once more at his attribute panel, only to see strength 9 plus 1.8, and the plus 1.8 in brackets was clearly the effect of Blacksmith Strength, though the duration was not displayed. Rain stood quietly in place, feeling the changes in his body. About half a minute later, Rain felt the warmth inside him gradually dissipate. It seemed that the Blacksmith Strength, an active skill, could only last for about half a minute at present. But this had already made Rain more than overjoyed. Without a doubt, Blacksmith Strength was a skill that could serve as a trump card. Glancing at the sun hanging slightly to the west, Rain muttered to himself, "Oh no, I almost missed lunchtime." So, without giving another glance at the other core skill Hammer Mastery, Rain quickly ran home. As soon as he entered the house, his mother greeted him. "Why are you so late? Did you go to the blacksmith's shop again?" Seeing Rain come back drenched in sweat, his mother asked with a heartache. Rain nodded and took the towel his mother offered, wiping the sweat beads off his forehead. Just as Rain was gathering his words, planning to discuss with his parents that he had agreed to join the Night Watchers army at Lord Hamilton's behest, his usually reticent father suddenly spoke. "Rain, come here for a minute." Rain was slightly surprised but followed his father into the room. He saw his father take an object wrapped in gray linen cloth from the old bedside table. As he slowly unwrapped it, 2 slightly worn imperial gold coins and more than 10 silver coins came into view. Old Rain hesitated for a moment, then picked up the only 2 imperial gold coins and handed them to Rain. Rain, lately whenever you're free, you run off to that miser Boris blacksmith shop. But it's useless unless you can pay the apprentice fee. You can't possibly move that heartless man with sincerity. Father, Rain started to say something but was interrupted by a wave of Old Rain's hand. Listen to me first, your mother and I have discussed this. These 2 gold coins should be enough for you to learn 1 or 2 forging skills from Boris, which might give you some advantage in the manor blacksmith apprenticeship assessment. The little money left, you're keeping at home for you and Bo-He to buy some white bread, meat, and eggs. We can't give you more. You're both still growing and your nutrition needs to keep up. Looking at his father's face, tanned by the sun, Rain was speechlessly moved. Firmly pushing back the gold coins his father had handed him, Rain raised his head and said, "Father, you and mother need not worry about my future anymore. I provided crucial leads on child disappearances to the newly appointed sheriff, Lord Hamilton. Lord Hamilton has promised that after my pageboy training ends, I can join the Night Watcher's army." Having said this, amidst Old Rain's astonished gaze, Rain also pulled out 2 brand new imperial gold coins from his own pocket and handed them over. "Father, these 2 gold coins are a reward from Lord Hamilton. Keep this money. We can eat better at home every day." Clearly, Rain wasn't reluctant to give all the gold coins to his family, but giving more would have been inexplicable with just the explanation of providing a lead. "Rain, is this true?" His mother, who had been listening at the door, could no longer contain her surprise and burst through the door, hurrying inside. "Of course, look, if you and father really don't believe me, you can go to the town hall and ask Lord Hamilton directly." Rain shrugged, a smile on his face. "May the goddess of fortune bless us." His mother cried tears of joy, praying continuously while hurriedly wiping away her tears. At lunchtime, Old Rain unusually splurged on several bottles of rye beer and seemed determined to have a few drinks with Rain, leaving Anna and Bo-He exchanging puzzled looks. Anna sensed something, but felt too embarrassed to ask Rain directly. "Rain, from now on you're a man. Hick about you and Anna." "Hick, it's up to you, son, I support you." Hick, seeing his father who had drunk too much, Rain felt a wave of embarrassment and quickly exchanged glances with Anna, who then swiftly diverted her eyes. The next second, like a frightened rabbit, Anna immediately lowered her head, a blush spreading across her fair cheeks. After the meal, Anna spoke to Rain with a slightly shy expression. "Rain, can you come to the room for a moment?" Having spent a day at Rain's home, Anna still felt somewhat uneasy, not because Rain's family treated her badly, but because they were too enthusiastic. The 2 made their way to a room on the 2nd floor. "Rain, I want to go back to my own home," Anna said, lowering her head with her fingers interlocked tightly, clutching the hem of her skirt. For some reason, although Rain was her savior, every time she faced him, Anna always felt a bit nervous, and her heart would pound fiercely. "That's probably not a good idea." Rain shook his head and declined. Why not?" Anna looked at Rain with a puzzled and surprised expression, her mind a tangle of confusion. This response was not what she had expected at all. Could it be that? While the girl's thoughts fluttered, Rain spoke with a serious expression. "According to Lord Hamilton, the constable, the Blackbeard I killed last time is the younger brother of the leader of the county town hyena gang. I'm worried that they might send someone to investigate his brother's disappearance. So, it's better for you to stay here for the time being and not go back." Anna's face immediately turned pale. "Don't worry, I will be joining the Night Watcher's army soon." Calm Anna's shocked emotions, Rain shared with her a part of his conversation in Lord Hamilton's office. After his explanation, Anna felt somewhat relieved. Her complexion also stabilized considerably, and she nodded. "Then, all right then, I'll help out with whatever I can," she agreed. Rain waved his hand and said, "If you have time, you could keep Bo-He company. No one is at home usually, and I'm sure she'd be very happy to have your company." "Of course, that's no problem. Bo-He is very cute and well-behaved." Anna's eyes narrowed happily into crescents as she spoke of Bo-He. "That's enough then, don't worry. Things will get better and better." Anna looked at Rain's determined expression, nodded, and gave a firm "MHM." Although Rain was only a few months older than her, he inexplicably gave her a sense of reliability. She believed in what Rain said. In the afternoon, on his way to the blacksmith shop, Rain checked another core skill of the blacksmith trade, hammer mastery, which was represented by the icon of a diagonally placed flathead hammer. Hammer mastery LV1, passive, slight increase in damage when the host uses any hammer-type weapons. Rain frowned as he read. Having always practiced swordsmanship, was he now expected to learn some sort of hammer-based combat skill? It seemed that this skill wasn't likely to immediately enhance his combat abilities. However, Rain was already quite satisfied with his promotion to blacksmith, both with the increase in strength and the acquisition of new active skills, especially blacksmith strength. Rain flipped to the first page of his status panel. Profession, blacksmith LV1, 1/100, /militiaman and LV3, 328/500, remaining attribute points. 0 remaining skill points. 1 beneath both core skills, there was a mention of a LV suggesting that they were likely upgradable. But Rain noticed that there wasn't an experience bar in brackets beneath them, which could very well mean that core skills couldn't be upgraded through practice, but only through the use of skill points. This caused a slight frown on Rain's brow, because this meant that the already scarce skill points were now even more precious. Rain looked at the remaining 1 skill point on the panel, hesitating again and again, but still not assigning it. The giant bear breathing technique is currently at the